Welcome to episode 115 of the Custodian's AFL podcast, Nick and Blaze. I am Blaze, your host, and in this one, we have finally learned who Tasmania's inaugural coach for the 2028 season will be. That is the headlining news to start off the episode. We also discover that the Giants are one of the most inconsistent teams in the competition, having lost to the Bombers. The Hawthorn absolutely dismantling Richmond. Both of those happening on our Sunday games. Very, very interesting games happening on our Thursday nights and Friday nights. And Saturday was a little bit all over the place. We will get into that in a little bit more detail as we go throughout the episode. But first of all, how are you doing, Mr. Cyrek?
Not too bad, not too bad. I can't remember what I did at all on the weekend. I don't think it was much.
You were away,
Apart from
apart from that.
oh yeah, I was away a bit before, so I think I was just like getting back into it. Anyway, I'm sort of just spending a bit of time. I'm not sure if I mentioned on the podcast, but my mum unfortunately got a bit of an injury when she was traveling, so she's struggling to walk at the moment. So I'm sort of looking after her as well. So I got her some lunch, got her a tea. She's sitting comfortably at the moment, so I thought I'd get the podcast out. And yeah, apart from that, it's not been going too bad. How about yourself, Blaze?
I have had a very productive week. As you can see behind me, I finally have a wall. You can no longer look into my living room and see my laundry like just casually in the corner because I finally have a wall up behind me. It's not done yet, as you can see. It still needs to be properly rendered and painted, but that will get done this upcoming weekend. I also went to IKEA. If you've seen any of my Instagram stories over the past 2 days, you would have seen that I have a brand new table and some chairs and a rug, which is all very, very cool. I've already set those up. I have a new cabinet as well that will go into my living room, but that will be built later. If I was to angle my camera a little bit down behind me, you would see all of my IKEA rubbish because I have not put it into the bins yet. That's besides the point. I also went to the beach for a little bit yesterday with some friends, which was really nice. We just did a little walk along the coast. It's very helpful when you actually
Not going
live.
for a swim in this weather?
No. I mean, I can't swim for one, but even just a walk in the water would be too cold. But it is very beneficial when you live like a 15-minute walk from the beach. It's so convenient.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah,
yeah, no,
otherwise, not so much has been going on. I do plan on going to. I didn't get to go to the footy to the Richmond Hawthorn game because I was working at the time. Plus, I had all of this stuff to deal with. Um, but I'm hoping to go to the game this week, even though it's a night game and I'm going to be very tired. But I'm also expecting another absolute dismantling, but we shall see.
exactly.
All
All right,
right.
shall we start with what the episode's titled after? One that's close to home for me, very
Yes,
far away in terms of location, but
it was.
a senior coach being announced
It was.
for Tasmania.
It was officially revealed as of yesterday, and the proper press conference happened today as we're recording this. That Ken Hinkley, the former Port Adelaide head coach, will be the inaugural coach for the Tasmanian Devils in 2028.
Yeah, exactly. And look, as I said, to me, this just makes sense. The two main coaches in the running, I guess it's three really, with Ken Hinkley, Nathan Buckley, and John
John Longmire,
Longmire.
yes.
Uh, Buckley obviously taking that assistance coaching position in Geelong to try and shore up his candidacy. But obviously, both of them fall a bit short. I don't know how much Longmire was actually campaigning for it. His name was just always thrown in the mix. But Ken Hinkley wins out, and it sort of makes sense. He took a very young rebuilding team in Port Adelaide and turned them into contenders at a relatively quick pace. One thing you can't argue with our whole of his tenure was the culture. They were very, very on the same page, very united front, always played for the coach. And I think, for a young team that's going to have a bit of hardship early, as I said, it's very hard to believe that Tasmania will be beginning 2028,
Yes.
all guns firing. Um, but it's just yeah, it's just going to be interesting to see how he holds them together, develops the youth, and I guess he gets gets to start planning because already they're planning for who they're going to take with their, I guess, priority draft picks. This one's talking about, who is it? Someone Walsh. It's Xavier Walsh's brother who plays for Port Adelaide.
Yes.
Axel Walsh.
Axel Walsh.
WA too. I didn't actually know that.
Well, there you
Yeah,
go.
double X. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. As I said, I really think too it's very nice because I would hate for like Ken's last memories were to be that slightly bitter ending. Port Adelaide, where he just seemed to, some say overstay his welcome, others say, I mean, Port Adelaide just kept him on. You can't really complain, but yeah, as I said, it was probably a year too late. But he gets to continue his legacy as a good team builder and culture builder.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, as I said, to me, this just makes sense.
Yeah, like this honestly, again, also made perfect sense to me as well. I really generally felt like the only two that were really more seriously in the running were him and Longmire. It made the most sense to have actual veteran coaches kind of at the helm of a brand new team. Whilst, I commend Nathan Buckley for going back into the coaching scene proper and actually doing it the proper way by going through via, an assistant role at Geelong. I think he probably needs a little bit more time before going for a proper head coaching role, unlike whatever the heck is going on at Essendon. In terms of what this looks like for the Devils, I think this is really good. As from what I can remember, I haven't actually looked recently. I believe the VFL team is currently sitting in 8th. So they already have a fairly decent, at least VFL level list that they can build from. Going into the 2027 draft onwards, with their huge amount of concession picks. Obviously, for those unaware, they do have to trade at least half of those picks to other clubs, either for picks in return or for players in the 2027 draft. So that'll be something to keep an eye on next year. But other than that, like this is definitely a really good move to have a coach nailed down now because it gives them time to sort of plan out and build what sort of coaching staff he wants around him, and then he can work with the list manager as to what sort of players they want to go for going into the years ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, I guess the slightly also interesting thing for Port Adelaide wise is, as always with a former coach going to their to a rival club. Technically, I guess rival club. It will be interesting to see if he lures over any Port talent. He did make the cheeky comment for Zach Butters to delay his decision for another year. I don't think that's actually going to happen.
No, that's
I think
not going to happen.
if he was going to stay interstate, I think he would just stay at Port. But you never know. A man can dream. But yeah, as you say, I think the thing against Buckley was really he just wasn't. When he dropped off, it sort of aligned with Collingwood started rebuilding. So we don't really know Buckley's ability as a coach to rebuild. Obviously, that only got tested once, but there wasn't really anything conclusive from it. So
yeah,
Hinkley just made a lot of sense. I'm sure Buckley will get another chance. I think as long as he improves his player relationships, which was always a tiny bit of a question mark, I think that it'll go well. So
I definitely think there
said,
will be plenty of opportunities coming up. Whether
exactly.
That's whether someone like Bevo decides to step away from the coaching scene after being in it for so long, and the Bulldogs position opens up or something like
refresh,
that.
Yeah.
Because he has been the head coach of the Dogs for quite a while now. So, but who knows how long he's gonna stay in the system.
He's the longest tenured after Scott, isn't he?
I believe so. Yeah, I think those two are kind of
obviously.
Well, obviously, we also take out Ross Lyon because there was a gap between his Freo stint and then going to St Kilda.
Yeah, I meant tenure to one club, but yeah.
Yes. But yeah, no, this is very exciting for Tassie. And it definitely, it definitely gives us a lot more of a reason to keep a close eye on what Tassie get up to over the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, absolutely.
and even
And I think Ken is very solidly built. He seems like a bit of a tradie bloke. He might help build the stadium if they're going too slow. He'll get him on it.
get him on the tools. I'd love to see it.
Grab his chalky milk in the mornings. Grab a few. I
We
was
we
gonna
should
say bricks,
we
but
should have
maybe
recruited
they
him to
sound like
Richmond. Would have
bricks.
been perfect in helping rebuild Punt Road.
Maybe.
But
Yeah, honestly,
this
yeah.
also before we keep going, this also is a good reason to also keep a close eye on their VFL list as well, because
Mm,
they could start to kind of not necessarily grab AFL listed players, but like players that get delisted or players that aren't getting enough senior game time. They could
yeah,
try and push them over to the Tassie VFL side purely to get purely just to have them on the list, and there's a more likely
yeah,
chance of them getting elevated to AFL level once they actually come in.
exactly. And the downside, well, not even downside, but as I said, the worst outcome is they'd have some seniority in that VFL team. Um, Obviously, it's probably going to be one of the. They're already doing all right at the moment, as you looked it up and said they're around fifth. So, as I said, they might be a VFL force to reckon with uh,
Well, I
next
mean,
year. I'm not actually sure
they're
how
currently
they.
captained by former
Yeah,
Swans player Robbie Fox, so
yeah,
there's a little bit to it.
yeah. I'm not actually sure how the Gold Coast and GWS did in their respective
They're
leagues before coming in.
before coming into when the NEFL was still a
Yeah,
thing, I think they were pretty high up. But since being folded into the
yeah,
VFL, they're like at the bottom. It's not a pretty sight for them.
yeah. No, I meant like the couple of years before coming into the league, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm pretty sure like
that's
when they
too
were
long
farming
ago.
through the NEFL, like they were quite high up in
Yeah,
their respective leagues. Um,
yeah,
all right, I believe that is all like the big bit of news that we have for this week. So let's jump into our games of the round, starting with a big, I say big, it was a decent sized Thursday night clash down in Geelong where the Cats played St Kilda, and with a 27-point margin, Geelong did win out 15-12, 102 to 11-9, 75.
yeah. It was a nice win by the Cats, but I feel like ultimately it was a bit of a Pyrrhic victory. Obviously we'll talk to it in depth, but the loss of Holmes for the season to add to the Jeremy Cameron injury will leave a bit of taste for Cats fans. I think the most positive thing out of this game was that the fringe players, though, that the Cats brought in, seem to really fit in well. As well as obviously Brian Myers, who, just really didn't seem like he lost a step, stamped his authority on the struggling St Kilda defence, and the forward line looked relatively solid. Uh, I thought that the Saints applied hard pressure at times. Our others sort of let ball movement come a bit too easy as they were dominated in territory and outside marking. The inside midfield was even, but outside of Marshall, there was not much offensive potency from the possessions, and Naz had his worst night out in a long time with the Ocean Mullen tag. He is one of the premier taggers, along with James Jordan. Probably not as offensively based as James Jordan, but I think actually O'Sheen kicked a goal as
Mullen
well,
can
though. So
absolutely go run both ways, I should say. But I
yeah,
definitely think James Jordan is very much the more offensive minded out of the two. If you want to compare them like head to head.
yeah, nah, it's But as I said, in terms of what they're able to do, because as I said, Naz, it wasn't like he was trying, but as I said, just couldn't get much damage from his disposal, which was just sort of the Saints all night. Um, But, as well as compounding to that problem, I think also with the Saints, their passengers really hurt
Mm-hmm.
when the structure of the team is doing, as I said, when structurally, sorry, I should say, the team is doing okay. Because I don't think St Kilda really seemed lost or out of, not hugely out of depth, but they definitely weren't getting bang for their buck. Their forward line told fill-ins found absolutely nothing when they're not hot. I'm talking about your Owens, your what's his name? Um,
What are you thinking?
where are we at?
Uh,
No, I guess Caminiti technically, but I wasn't really
yeah,
gonna. As I said, he's been. Yeah, he had a whenever he goes in the forward line, I think it's a bit too much of a net negative. I really only want to see him in defence.
Yeah, I
If
much
I'm
prefer
St
him in
Kilda,
defence.
yeah, Keeper Sharman. That's the other one.
Ah, yes.
And as I said in this game, all combined for 1 point as the key forward attack. And it just makes it hard because 11-9 when you don't have any key forwards is okay. But as I said, if your key forwards can kick at least 3, then it's just a 1-goal game. And I know it doesn't exactly work out like that, but they definitely need it. And we saw Geelong, even though Shannon Neal only kicked a goal, hasn't really been that prominent the last couple of weeks. Jay Polkinghorn was able to deliver a bit. 5 shots, unfortunately 2 goals, 3. But a pretty potent threat.
Yes.
Along with Ollie Henry. He kicked a couple of goals. So,
I think
as I said,
he kicked Pokemon kicked 5 goals in the VFL before this debut. I think it was very, very smart to bring him in, like just as they finally decided to pull the pin on Cameron. Granted, Cameron had an injury himself and couldn't actually play. But considering they probably kept him in for a little too long, this was definitely.
Well, that's going to ultimately be the question. Is like, should have Polkinghorn come in earlier? And look, the answer is we're never going to know.
Yeah, correct.
Like, as much as it's easy to say from the outside when it's been and we know it's wrong, as I said, there might have been nothing that those weeks off would have done for Cameron, but it is what it is. Talking about people brought in, Jack Clark as well had an absolutely fantastic game intercept defending. I think he led intercepts possessions for the night, and his ball use was for a bit, but otherwise did pretty well.
Yeah, we love to see some newer intercept defenders come into
12 intercepts.
Come into a little bit more dependency, especially in a back line that's usually a little bit more stacked when it comes to interceptors. Like it's very good to see someone a little bit new and fresh, kind of liven up the system a little.
Yeah, how old is he? I think he's 25, isn't he?
He's close to mature age. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Oh, no, he's only 22. Okay.
Still quite young.
In 2023. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was drafted a little earlier than that.
It is young talent coming through. So again,
it's
we talk about Geelong and
it's that Geelong thing. It's like how they just find like these such high talented players and just bring them in so seamlessly.
Have enough list spots, you know what I mean? It's like it's not like that many people deserve to go out, but as I said, up until this point, they'd had pretty much no real injuries to deal with, and then unfortunately, as blessed as you are, you can equally quickly find yourself being unblessed with the 2 major injuries coming in weeks, week by week. So yeah, as I said, but as I said, the reason I want to bring up those players is because as I said, St Kilda, they're a bit more tested on depth, but the fact that it's hard to pick out like week in week out who's Geelong's going to be worst performers. There's no real list cloggers on that list, and it's just the difference between a upper level team and a mid level team like the Saints. As I said, Jarklake and Polkinghorn came into the game and looked better than some of the more senior mid young. You know what I mean? Like the older of the younger Saints
more mature players.
22, 25 years old. So but as the Saints, they're heat pressure. They've been consistent this year. It wasn't terrible. But yeah, as I said, I definitely felt like the result was reflected in the scoreline. Geelong never really were challenged too much. And they played solidly. Sometimes I felt they could convert a bit more. But ultimately, all things considered, they did pretty well.
Yeah. It's just Geelong's sort of consistency, right? Like they've been very good at matching up, not just matching up against these lower tier teams, but even with the newer sort of talent they bring in, they're able to stand above them. That's kind of the benefit of Geelong's system is that they just find these kids. I mentioned it just before. Like they just find these kids either from either high picks or low picks or VFL talent that hasn't been recognized, like Sean Manor. And they just get the best out of them week in, week out. It's so impressive what Chris Scott and his team are able to do with the players that they've had in the system since the early 2010s.
Yeah, exactly. And as this is an important win because obviously, and I should probably announce it, we're going to be doing a run home episode. Well, we're recording tomorrow. It will be out sometime when we decide.
It'll
But for Geelong,
probably be Thursday, I would say in my head. I was thinking Thursday. So
yeah,
we'll figure that out.
yeah, but for Geelong, they'll be safely in the top 10 with their run. Well, maybe not even safely, but relatively comfortable in the top 10 with this win. But
Yes.
there would have been chances for them to drop if they didn't get this match. So they needed to steady their season. Obviously, the tough period of time coinciding with a few injuries, and it didn't look that great. But as I said, they've got a good chance with an easy 3 games to sort of head towards that um, you know 7th or 6th spot. Wait, 7th or 6th? Yeah, about that. Maybe. Yeah.
Something like that. They definitely
Which
have
they
an
probably deserve.
opportunity to push top six.
Yeah.
There
Yeah,
is
they're not going to get top 4. Probably not 5. I think 5 will be fairly grouped together. Um, but if they can get a home final, maybe even Jag avoiding the elims, I think that would be better for them because as I said, they definitely feel better than 9th.
yeah, agreed. They don't
There's a bit of a
feel
dropout
like a
between 9th
team
and 10th.
outside of the top eight. But
Yeah.
they also don't feel like a team that belongs in the top four just yet either.
No, I said I think yeah, definitely they've just fallen a bit short this season. Tough schedule, but at the same time, as I said, just hasn't quite lined up for them. They're always a team that's prone to a few regular season hiccups,
Yep.
but as I said, again, if this was a top 8 system, they would be sweating a bit more. I think that would have been more interesting than seeing, is St Kilda or GWS gonna make 10th? You know what I mean? It's like, come on, what are we doing here?
Yeah,
But
and
anyway,
and like on the St Kilda side of things, this is just another stab in 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 the opportunistic heart, I guess, of them even being able to make the top 10. It just makes it
man,
a
to be
little bit
honest,
harder for them.
it's like, yeah, but they've got a pretty honest run home, and the fact that they showed that they were competitive against Geelong, I don't think will cause too many alarm bells. I think they're still. Oh, it's pretty much a coin flip between them and GWS. We'll talk about that more, but yeah, as I said, the Saints at least still have destiny in their own control, so we'll see how that goes for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, though, as we had mentioned before, Geelong did come into this game with a little bit more injuries than they would have liked. Obviously, the big one being Max Holmes with an ankle that has ruled him out for the rest of the season, and Sean Manor did come off with a hamstring concern. Um, no confirmation as to the severity. I believe it's not that bad, so he should be okay. Maybe ruled out for a couple of weeks potentially, but we'll be right in time for a finals berth, hopefully. On the MRO side of things, Jai Clark was fined $2,000 for rough conduct against Jack Higgins, and Patrick Dangerfield was fined $1,500 for rough conduct against Cal Wilkie. And that now brings us to our Friday night clash. A very, very big clash between the Sydney Swans and the Adelaide Crows. And with a 16-point margin, would you believe it? The Crows look absolutely dominant against the Swans, 13-9-87 to 10-11-71.
Dominant in parts because, again, while I do think like Adelaide were the better of these two teams, and I was very impressed because Adelaide, I think, were at the time I was looking, they were the 3rd youngest team out there. I'll double check on that, but rocking a pretty young side out there. 4th youngest. So Essendon, Port, West Coast put out younger teams than Adelaide, but it really didn't show. It was pretty mature by the Crows as I think it was a defensive and wet game, like obviously 71-87. It sort of indicates that. But, I think what was helpful for Adelaide was just the total forward presence. Not so much, you not like goals after goals, but it was always the moments, especially with Fogarty in that last quarter, which really helped them over the struggle. Because, as I said, it was a very tough fought game. Sydney unfortunately had their toll sort of struggle against Adelaide's strong defence. And I think that's really just what separated the two teams. It was the average scrap, high pressure contest with clean play. I would say coming in spurts. The high impact moments players like Warner, Rankin, Fogarty, and Blakey were the only ones that really lit up the game consistently.
Mm-hmm.
For Adelaide, I think Malira and Michaelani had some great rebound. But unfortunately, it still didn't lead up to any back half score, which is Adelaide's biggest bane at the moment, just due to pressure on ball movement. But for the Adelaide Crows, the 51-38 stoppage advantage meant that at least that territory win led to a forward half advantage, especially in that first and last quarter. They were a really nice form of dominant there. Sydney weren't bad getting hands on ball first. It was a real scrap, as most of it came from Grundy, who was very held accountable by McAndrews and even pinch hitter Toby Murray. This is one of the games that's like, yeah, if you get beaten by your bigger opponent, Grundy gets hands on ball, make sure they don't do anything with it. And they did a really impressive job for how inexperienced those two are in nullifying one of the premier, arguably third best ruckmen in the competition.
Yeah, it was very impressive to see McAndrews and Murray not necessarily match up really well against Grundy, but they did their best work in being able to nullify a lot of his hitouts and stop Sydney's really strong midfield from getting so much so much score out of their center clearances. You'll notice that whilst clearance numbers fairly even across the board, I imagine that a lot of Adelaide's work has come a little bit more from stoppage, not necessarily from the center. But I think a lot of that strong defensive effort right in the middle it just shows how much more defensive minded Adelaide has become this season.
Yeah, exactly. They just don't turn stoppages into score. It was 3-4 to 4-5. In a wet game where you can probably see a few more stoppage play. Turning into goals. It was pretty impressive. And you're right, center clearances were even despite the clearance dominance by Adelaide. So, as I said, it was a tough game. Ball movement was tough. And, it just takes those small moments. And, for both big ruckmen to also contribute to the goal with goals, was very good. Although I did see McAndrews shot for goal, and he has a worse shot for goal than when I first saw the sewing steps, the good old Josh Kennedy stutter step. I don't know if you've seen him, but he literally turns to the side before he runs in. He runs straight, turns to the side, comes back in, kicks.
Yeah, I don't understand it.
Yeah. Anyway, so but yeah, good for him and Toby Murray, because as I said, he doesn't really look like a forward. I definitely don't think they're getting that much value of him for a key forward. So for him to still get a goal, do his role there, is pretty good. And yeah, too much of Sydney's best game, as you were sort of hinting, came from the centre circle. Sorry, from behind the centre circle.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, the game wasn't really set up for it. I was talking about Blakey's run and carry. It just didn't convert into that many forward chains into the forward half. But as I said, they did hold Adelaide to some tough shots. It's just that Adelaide were very on song with the goal kicking accuracy. I thought Sydney's defence probably played a bit better than I thought they would. And at the end of the day, there wasn't really that much difference between them. Adelaide found it easier to score, but I did feel like Sydney felt more restricting when on top. But for a young team like Adelaide, showing the poise and a little bit of excitement here and there as they evolve into contenders in a tough but achievable race to become top four. I definitely think, it was just, impressive, again, and this was a game where, Jordan Dawson gets the tag, obviously, by
James Jordan.
About him before. James Jordan, and, gets really locked down. Again, solid hands on ball, but like James Jordan, Jordan Dawson, when he's under a bit of pressure, sometimes he doesn't get as clean. Sam Berry also fairly limited as well. I think their best midfield ended up being Peatling. But, as I said, or Rankin, I guess, depending on, as I said, I think he took about 50% centre bounces. He was very damaging up forward and in the midfield.
I guess.
So, but Adelaide's still very clean on the outside, and, that's one of their strengths is like, when their inside midfield isn't playing overly that well, they've still got strong presence in other areas to get score, and they've got a solid defence. Whereas Sydney, as I said, we just saw them struggling with their forwards, not quite on song. Again, still getting good production outside, and it was good to see Tom Packley kick some goals. But yeah, as I said, in the wet conditions, not really a tall forwards night, and they had a negative impact, while Adelaide's Crows forwards had a positive impact. It was probably as simple as that, really.
Yeah, it was just like that sort of weird. It's a weird balance where like Sydney's defense, whilst not one of the worst in the league by far. Like
Hmm.
they have a fairly competent defense, and they have had it all season long.
Yeah,
I think Adelaide's like forward line is just remarkably better in terms of a matchup. And
yeah,
obviously the win kind of quantifies that, but I think it's just more so what they're able to present, even with
mm,
and without Tex. Like they're still very much able to function
yeah,
like a really solid forward line without
mm,
without one of their key tools, and purely because of the fact
yeah,
that Fogarty has done some fantastic work this season. Philthorpe continues to do some fantastic work this season. You've got your smaller boys like Ben Keys, who has done some fantastic work all season long as well, and just like obviously the midfield, when they push up forward, they can have some huge damaging impact as well. Obviously, Rankin is very good at doing that. James Peatling, whilst more defensive minded, has been able to sneak up forward a couple of times and play a lot more of that pressure role rather than necessarily like a goal sneak sort of role whenever he's had that opportunity. Like they have such a well-rounded midfield to forward structure that can easily become one of the best and one of the hardest kind of structured teams to play against, especially in the back half of this season.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's not really too much I want to say about this game. Although I did have the thought that I would like float to you because it is getting that time of season. Is Tom McCartan sort of underrated in all Australian discussions? Because it's had a pretty good year. I know Sydney hasn't had their focal point in their defence, but in terms of like linking up, he's got definitely had more hands on ball this year. He's done a lot more damage with his kicking. Is it just because we've always seen him as more of a key defender type? That we're sort of overlooking some of his link up and deep ball
I think
movement
a lot of his skill
abilities.
set from earlier in his career was very much hampered by his injuries. So we never
Yeah.
really got to see much of what he was actually really capable of. But since he's had a really clean run at it over the past couple of years, yeah, I think he's a little bit underrated. Um,
Yeah.
my big question is he guaranteed to be make an appearance in at least the 44, or do you think
Oh,
he
he's
will
got.
miss out?
It would be ridiculous not, because again, I don't think like I think you got to put a crow in there, whether that's it's probably got to be Josh Worrell, although he wasn't as huge. Did he? Yeah, he played this game.
He probably
But
shouldn't have,
as I said,
considering off-field stuff going on. But
yeah,
yes, he did play this
I
game.
mean,
If
that
if
is what it
if
is.
Keane wasn't injured through like a strong half of this season, I reckon he probably would have
Mm,
been a guarantee for All Australian this year. Even though
that's a bit hard to
he's
tell.
Irish.
Yeah. um, yeah, no. So as I said, I think you just got to put Harris Andrews in there. I think he's done enough, even though he had a couple of blips earlier in the season. I think as I said,
Yeah, he's just
we're at the point where all defenders have had a few, and as I said, his offensive output
he's still just by
has
far
made
and
up for
away
that.
one of the best key defenders in the league. Like there's no ifs or buts about it.
Yeah, and then, you got to decide whether you put a Freo defender in there, and, then it's pretty much open, As I said, it depends on how flexible you want to be. Blakey will probably appear there just because,
I imagine it would
again,
be Blakey because he's like the quote unquote big name of that defense.
yeah, but, when we're going to the next tier, I don't think Wilkie's been as consistent. Obviously, Wiedering's been off the park. Sam Taylor would be the other one that he's probably competing up against. So, it'll be has Sam Taylor buried enough games versus is Tom McCartan's, output and not overly defensive mindset. holding him back. But he definitely deserves to be in conversation. I would put him above Collins and probably on par with Aaliyah as well. Aaliyah probably could be pushing All Australian.
I think
as well,
Aaliyah could
but,
be pushing All Australian, despite the injuries that he's had here and there throughout this season. I think he's done some really, really solid work, despite like the losses and the outcomes.
I don't think he's been injured this year. That's Rats. I
Oh,
think
I know.
Aaliyah's
I
played
know.
every
Rats
game.
has been very injured. That's
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure he missed a game or two for something. Maybe it was concussion. I can't remember.
Nah, not this year. I think Aaliyah's one of the few players to play every game. Yeah, he's got 18.
Oh, there you go. Okay, fair enough then. Yeah, I think Elliott's got to be up there, 100%.
Top
Unfortunately,
instetter in the league at the moment.
oh yeah,
It's
oh
a
he's
mark.
definitely up there then. When
Yeah.
we have the opportunity to make our own potential All Australian squad of 44 or the full 25, we will definitely do so. Yeah, is it 25? No, hang on. 18 on the field, 5 on the bench. 23. It's 23.
25, isn't it?
Oh no, it might be 20. I can't remember. I can't remember how many people play in this game anymore. There's too many of them. But yes, once we have the availability to make our own All Australians, we will do that. However, there was an injury to come out of this game, and it's both the MRO and the injury does kind of tie into each other. Harry Cunningham will miss next week's game with concussion, and Darcy Fogarty has been suspended for 3 matches. It is being challenged, unfortunately. Actually, maybe not unfortunately, for striking Harry Cunningham and resulting in said concussion.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that's sort of hard to argue against because obviously it was high contact. Was it to the chin or to the throat? It's concussion, so it must have been chin.
It was definitely front on. I know that much.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, as I said, he'll probably miss, which again, sort of takes a bit away from Adelaide because they will need to be pretty not spotless, but pretty solid if they're to make a top 4 run. But they'll at least guarantee themselves a home finals, I would think, this year. As I said, they would probably just need to either win a sneaky game against Fremantle or just win the rest of their remaining games to be top 4. We'll wait and see there.
Yeah. I imagine there'd probably be a solid top 4. I don't think too much of a shake. I think like the teams kind of vying for 3rd, 4th, and 5th are the Crows, Hawthorn, and Brisbane at the moment.
I'll say they're the only ones. I don't think anyone else is seriously going to do.
Sydney could drop depending on if they lose a game or two, and that opens up 2nd position.
Yeah, but still, it's still 3, 4, and 5th.
Yeah, pretty much.
Melbourne's not going to do it. Western Bulldogs are way behind in terms of percentage.
Yeah,
so.
agreed. But speaking of the team, that doesn't have to vie for those positions, we're now talking about Freo, where Port Adelaide hosted them at the Adelaide Oval, and with a 28-point margin, Freo did win out 15-13, 103 to 11-9, 75.
I was going to say, Port aren't vying for position at the moment. They've got their ethical take.
You wish I was talking about Port in a positive light.
I still think there's a lot for. I mean, yeah, as I said, I don't know how much you got about this game for watching. Like, this was a very noble effort by Port Adelaide. It was a really strong 3rd quarter. Saw Port get beaten by a Fremantle side who was pretty much doing what we need to do, even if it is perfect mode. In fact, with Port having all their injuries, they were still the better team in the first half. Zadal becoming an unlikely target, getting 3-3 for the game. Port's midfield also shone early, with Wines finally getting some game time and making the most of it. Bergman playing a very defensive role, but still being a part of that central midfield, and leaving the offensive midfield numbers to Joe Richards and Jace Burgoyne also here there. So, it was a very mismatched bit of pass, like a lot of players that you don't mind seeing in the centre bounce. But having all of them together is weird, but they did make the most of it and ended up winning the centre clearances. And the best part, it wasn't just the centre clearance and stoppage points wins. It was the dampening of impact of Luke Jackson, Jai Sarong, Matthew Johnson, Jai Sarong, Caleb Sarong, I should say, and Hayden Young. Got position, but lacked impact both ways.
Mm-hmm.
It was very rare to see Fremantle's midfield be so, maybe not anemic, but
Middling?
not as productive as it could be. Yeah, I don't know. It's really like context because it's sort of hard because it's unfair to say like they were bad because they were just challenged by a hard-working Port unit. But you know what I mean? It is at the same time a very weird mismatch of players.
Was it weirdly like them, I guess, dropping to Port's level to some degree, or was it more Port playing up to their level?
I mean, a lot of this game was Port playing up. Like, legitimately in the first half, they were, playing really, like, they would have been ahead of most teams in the competition by probably about 3 or 4 goals. Whether they were always going to last, but, that was always up to debate. But, and it took Freo actually going to that another gear. Like, they're only in playing their best football for 1 quarter. They're playing reasonable football for the rest, but that third quarter, it was very hard because, as I said, unfortunately, the biggest bane is Port's defense was really exposed. Dudley, Tracy, Amos were just too much for Port to handle, even if they did limit their supply in. And it was a shame because, as I said, in terms of ground level play, Port did a really good job, held Freo to 2-5 from 12 general play shots. But the marks inside 50 and contested marks were just heavily in Freo's favour. They couldn't do anything to stop them. So, it was just, for Freo, it wasn't like they were waiting to their exposed Port's weakness, but at the same time, like, it's still impressive. You know what I mean? It's like, they just refuse to believe that they're going to be outplayed in any contest. They always feel like they're in it. It was just, as I said, maybe the GWS game was probably the closest you'll get for them to being outplayed the entire match. But, it was definitely like one of those things. It was just like, okay, Port, you can still see their injuries. Like, their ball use pretty, like, their ball movement was good. Their ideas were good. They just turned the ball over a bit too much and kept Freo in it when they were struggling by turnover. It would have been very interesting if that didn't happen. It would have been more pressure. But at the same time, they were saying, okay, Freo, like, yeah, you could probably get close by scoring off turnovers, but you're not going to guarantee a win. You're going to have to do something. And as I said, in that third quarter, they just rose to the challenge. I thought, as much as you could say this is a knock on Freo or whatever, like, I don't think they did that much wrong. Like I said, as much as I think Port would have beaten a chunk of teams with a performance like that this week, I still think Freo weren't that far out of their normal. And I think that's a really impressive thing because, again, Port were absolutely rooted in terms of, experience and, talent just available to pick this week. So,
This was
as I said,
definitely the kind of game that
hard to be disappointed.
Yeah, like it's definitely the kind of game that was perfect for the younger players for Port coming out this week because it gave them a good challenge up against the best team in the one of the best teams in the competition. And it kind of really tested what a skill set is, and I definitely, and that first half especially, like they were really put on display, like the kind of kids that Josh Carr really wants to rebuild this team around.
Yeah, exactly. And, as I said, obviously, we had the debut of Ballington O'Brien. He, had limited moments. He sort of split a lot of work with Josh Lai on that half back line. But, he made some nice little plays. Again, excitable plays in little moments. We saw Xavier Bammett act as a key forward. And as I said, it was tough because for a ridiculous task to ask for Bammett, who is probably about Ben Long size, I would say, and probably not that adept as playing as a key forward or playing as deep. He at least presented well, brought most of it to ground, even had a couple of marks. Didn't get involved in direct scoring, but was still around. Obviously, I talked about Zadal before, and Yeah, who else was there that was young? Oh, obviously, apart from missing, Jack Whitlock actually performed his role all right. As I said, unfortunately, he is, a bit like Mitch Georgiadis, keeping the Port Adelaide's behind ledger in check. Because again, I think, yeah, as I said, Zidane missed 3. Did it a Whitlock missed 3.
Ah, yes.
But apart from that, Port were pretty accurate.
Yeah,
And
11-9
it was
is
good to
definitely
see.
nothing to scoff at. Like, especially for such a young team with
It was
not
more,
with your
yeah,
your main key forward not out there.
yeah. It was just a limited opportunities from again not having all your best players out there. Freo did have more of the ball. It's just that Port at least restricted the way they were able to use it. Like Caleb Throng, he played a pretty grunt-worthy game. He was involved, but his disposal was lacking a bit of impact. I think Brayshaw was the best midfielder two-way. And then you had, obviously, I think, what's his name, had a few moments.
Ah, yes.
Uh,
I'm also
what
from.
was it? Oh, yeah, sorry, no, Erasmus. That's what surprised me,
Ah,
of all people. A bit on the outside. Kicked the goal and was pretty good on the wing. I was very impressed. Although Port weren't really playing that many good players on the wing. Unfortunately, most of the good players on the wing had to play central midfield. So, yeah. But as I said, it was really good. And yeah, and just as a bit of a surprise, Joe Berry ended up winning the Murphy Reed Joe Berry. He should have been taken cup
this
thing.
is
And obviously
one
Murphy
way
is
to
like
put it,
so
I
far in
guess.
front in the overall thing. But for this week, Joe Berry was the right pick with his 1-goal-1 and a bit more impact. So Murphy Reed having a surprisingly quiet game. Uh, again,
Interesting.
second-year player. This is like the first bad game in almost a season. Might have been his worst game for his career, to be honest. But yeah, has still like what 15 disposals. It wasn't
15 disposals for a
terrible,
small
terrible.
forward. Like, it's still fairly impactful. It just didn't equate
Yeah,
to score, which isn't entirely a bad thing. Um, or
yeah.
no, it
It's
didn't
just
equate
like
to
whatever.
his score. Could have equated to other
Yeah,
scores, just not his.
I think for Fremantle, so I think they'll be happy that at least Michael Frederick stood up. I think, as I said, I was very tentative, or not, maybe not tentative, but unsure ever since they brought in Bolton, what his role was going to be in the team. And last year, I had a few more question marks. He went in and out of games, but I think there's more of an outside player that can go in. Or not inside the inside midfield, sorry, outside player that goes inside 50 occasionally.
Yeah,
He's actually a lot more versatile. He does a lot of the things the team asks.
because
He,
he's
as I said, he's always got praise internally. So I think he does what the coach asks him fairly well. And they're getting a bit more out of him, which is really good. It's been his most consistent year, and he
he's
kicked
been
3
able
goals.
to keep his speed over the years, which is
Yeah,
his like core. He's like his core ability in terms of
yeah,
what sort of this team structure needs, and putting him on the outside, not necessarily always on the wing, but
mm,
being able to have that bit of burst, sort of what Bolton and Sarong and Brayshaw kind of have out of the middle,
yeah.
on the outside, just gives Freo so many more options in terms of
And
like
it
being
does
able to
plug out a
attack.
weakness too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly right.
because like the other, O'Driscoll hasn't had the best year. They're still a bit away from playing scary a bit more, or Sherry. I can never remember which way you meant to say it, but so as I said, it's a very minor weakness. Like, oh, your second option winger isn't playing as well as they could be. Like that's a weakness you have when you're on top of the ladder. But it is what it is. But
Yeah,
yeah, as I
it
said,
is
for Port,
really hard to
um,
kind of pinpoint like major
mm,
flaws in the Freo lineup at the moment, which is not necessarily. It's probably a bad thing for coaches to try and play against, but
makes it
definitely not a
hard.
bad
Yeah,
thing
exactly.
for audiences to watch because it just makes them look like a ton of fun.
Yeah, because I had that defender. I don't think is it Toad Murray? I can't remember. But he's been in good enough form in the waffle, and he just hasn't been able to get a game.
Yeah,
So
it's really hard to
Freo
break into
definitely have
this
some doubt.
lineup.
Yeah, have no injuries, mind you. So, like, they haven't need to be tested. And we've seen how quickly that can turn for Geelong. So, we touch wood that they don't hit the curse. But yeah, there's not really much for them to worry about this game, all things considered. It is just crazy nice to see how well Port responded after probably being excused to just, dropping the ball after losing a fair chunk of their experienced core.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, they do suffer one injury out of this, but it is on the minor side of things. With Jaeger O'Meara going off with an ankle. Bar anything coming out of the waffle, they're still a very, very healthy list, and it definitely at least makes way for one person. But it'll be very interesting to see if they make any more rotations going into this week. On the MRO side of things, Andrew Brayshaw was fined $1,875 for contact with an umpire, as it is his second offence.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, like, when you say where Frio's going, it's like, oh, Corey Wagner probably just comes in for Jaeger O'Meara. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, he's not that big a step down. So, it says where Frio is. But, enough glazing. A very positive review. Well, shall we go on to the... Oh, wait, Saturday afternoon games. We're on Saturday already.
We are already on Saturday. So now we're heading into our afternoon sessions. Starting off at Marvel Stadium, where North Melbourne hosted the Demons. And with a very, very interesting game overall. A 16-point margin with the Demons winning overall. 13-14-92 to 11-10-76.
Yeah, I saw... I mean, again, it was on the... what's it called? I forgot what show Damo's on, but there was a tiny bit of discussion what to make for this game for North Melbourne, because at the start, it looked really good. 6 goals to 2 early on with a lot of momentum. They really start off the game really, really hot until an offensive collapse happened again for North Melbourne. That would give Melbourne an easy win despite some junk time goals late. North was scrapping a few possessions early together. Few possessions early and forcing turnovers, and it was working a treat. Helped get the early jump as Paul Curtis was the beneficiary of some fortunate moments and bounces.
Mm-hmm.
Once Melbourne decided to hold and retain, though, it was pretty much over. Kangaroos couldn't win the ball back for 3/4 and only have useless back half possession for a majority of the match as they kicked more goals in the first quarter than the other 3 quarters combined, with 3 of those goals coming very late as Melbourne were tiring from a few injuries. As it's hard because you don't want to put North's credit for their fast start, give them too much of a knock for that. But geez, they look bad when they can't. When you hold the ball up against them, they just got no ability to win the ball back.
Yeah.
And for a team that wants to be offensive generating, it's very hard to maintain that. If all you need for your opponents is just to get a few uncontested marks, which North don't defend. You know what I mean? It's not that hard to find an uncontested mark against North Melbourne.
Their defense is very hot and cold. And whilst I do commend, and I've talked about this already over the past couple of weeks, I do very much commend Luke Parker's addition into the defense. I think it added a lot more versatility into their structure. And I think they've had a couple of players of recent that have actually really, highlighted some really solid ball movement out of their defense. It is very, very easy to still, still make a ton of space and really kind of shove their defense out of the way if you match up really well into them.
Yeah, because as I said, it was sort of hard because there were parts of their forward half that really wasn't too bad. But at the same time, it was Melbourne just could deal with it. You know what I mean? I actually still thought, and again, I've been talking about this few weeks, that LDU, Harry Sheasel, have been a bit more damaging than normal. I actually think that they have tinkered their game towards what North Melbourne actually need.
Mm-hmm.
And a few of it is still, very easy possession. There's no doubt about that. But they've changed up a few things. They've got a lot more forward movement out of their possessions. It's just a link up to their forward half that's sort of gone, especially when you compare it to Melbourne. And, at the end of the day, too, Melbourne, they were forced to do a few things in this game. And, they found players playing roles a bit better than, some of the players at North have been playing fully. And one of the ones I want to highlight was Fritsch actually found a new role as a halfbacker to cover some injuries. And whilst Bowie and, as I said, he really combined well with Bowie, who had a fantastic game, and Trent Rivers. And they just ate up all those North Melbourne's hacked attacks, which, as I said, LDU and Cheezel found the ball bit more link up, but they were just kicking to people who would turn it over. You know what I mean? Like, imagine like having Kobe on the field, but not Kobe. Like, I guess LeBron. I don't know. He's a really bad basketballer. Probably me. Imagine if like LeBron had to pass to me for any shots on goal. Like, it doesn't matter how good your assists are. It doesn't matter how many times LeBron's getting the hands on it. I'm still shooting.
Yeah, and there's no guarantee your shots are going to be accurate.
No, exactly. So, bit of a weird. You sort of get what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I kind of understand.
So as I said, and while Melbourne weren't as exciting from stoppage, it did feel very conscious. And for a degree, it did work. Because apart from that first little burst from North, Cherry was the only one getting hands-on clearances. As I said, LDU and Cheezel were mainly getting their ball from a bit more outside supply and scrappy. And when we've said this numerous times, when Cherry is your main clearance getter, it's good in terms of patching up things, but they aren't going to be the highest quality clearances ever.
Yeah,
he is a hacker, and it just means that on the back half you get a lot of rebound, and then on the flip side you get Tom Sparrow, who was absolutely having a fantastic day. But it wasn't just the midfield for North. Unfortunately, too, Comben is having a real rough patch. Jefferson really taken advantage from him. At least Comben's defensive form. He actually got his hand on ball a few times, but you know what I mean? It was just, it was just hard because, as I said, Melbourne, they lost a few troops were banged up, and yet, as I said, apart from really late, it wasn't like they were struggling for the most part. And while this wasn't a disgraceful effort by North, and to credit that there aren't as many disgraceful performances, but this is just a game where it's I don't think North Melbourne are at a point where we could just be happy with a 1 quarter, maybe 1.25 at home against a team, whilst good, not that, great, and a team that in match had a few injuries as well. I just think this was it was just a middling performance. And North have a few tough performances. I would put a rule out. I'll rule them out from finals. They're gonna at best be around 7 or 8 wins for the season, and it'll just be not a season to forget. Definitely a bit of a rise, but at the same time, it's not like there's much reason to think more than any other teams are going to surpass some of the teams around them next year.
Yeah, they're still heading in a good direction, but they're not there. They're not there to be contenders just yet. There's still a lot they have to work on.
Tied for 10th, which is the plus side.
It is still possible that they make wildcard, definitely, but in terms of the overall scope of things, it is definitely punching a little bit higher than probably where they would otherwise realistically be. Because I feel again, they've got a decent core. We've seen them be able to play really consistent footy, but they're not playing enough consistent footy just yet.
I argue against it. I would say that you could move around North Melbourne's core. I definitely think Larky, Sheezel, not Lucky Sheezel, I meant Sheezel obviously, but
LDU,
Larky and Curtis.
Oh yeah, Curtis.
LDU, Sheezel, and Curtis. Those are the only ones. I guess Sherry, but you're not really talking about Ruckman when you're talking about that sort of spine. I definitely think Wardlaw hit or miss. I definitely think Powell, as I said, they've got a few spots that I'm really unsure if the next finals North teams are going to be filled with the players that are on the park this week. And as I said, I think it's just a bit upsetting where, after so many years of draft, trying to inch towards it, it's still not as certain. But
Yeah.
again, you don't want to be too negative. As I said, this wasn't a terrible performance, but at the same time, it's just, I feel like this season's going to end with a bit of a whimper for North Melbourne.
I do agree.
They've got maybe 2 winnable games for the rest of the season, and that's being a tiny bit generous. But we'll see where they go.
I do agree in that. I can as long as obviously they're more likely to stay out of bottom 4 at this point, which is good. But if they're able to consistently either at least stay middle of the pack for the next couple of years as they try and like really properly develop their younger players and really I guess finalize their sort of structure, and then you can probably make a strong push for finals contention. That's probably the more realistic approach that Clarko and the rest of the coaching staff probably want out of this team right now, because they're definitely not ready to be serious finals contenders. It's definitely still a couple of years off.
Our system. Yeah. No, I said it is a shame, but as I said, with 10th Open, it puts avenues for them to like jag a good season.
The wildcard definitely does open opportunities, but they're not exactly in the right position to fully take advantage of that just yet, I don't think.
Yeah, but it's like 2 double ups in the bottom 4. Let's be real. Like, I mean, they arguably could have been pushing this year, but yeah. Anyway, let's not get too negative. Let's go towards. Well, I don't want to be positive towards this team, but I definitely do think they've earned a bit of their dues for having not too bad a season. And,
this is definitely a much better season than I think people expected, which is like a really positive thing overall. But in terms of like Melbourne though, they're having a much better season than people expected. Getting a new coach in, teams, and losing Petrarca and Oliver. People were expecting this team to maybe be a little bit more lower middle of the pack. But Melbourne have definitely impressed with their newer structure and their newer style of play. Unfortunately, it has led to a couple of injuries in this game to their defense, with Daniel Disco Turner coming off with some sort of chest injury, and CJ Chankwa coming off with a leg injury. That one a little bit more on the major side of things, so that will have to be kept a close eye on come injury list reveal tomorrow or today as a reveal. But yeah, that is definitely going to hurt in the defenses, and that's why Bailey Fritsch was found in their defense.
Yeah, exactly. So, as I said, that's why I wasn't too, I wasn't like, oh, wow, that, couple of goals late. I don't think it really meant anything in particular. But, as I said, when you look at North Melbourne, they just had much more even performance. And it was good to see Carlton Thorstrip too have a very good game, because he's one of those players that just sort of exists in that side. Young player looking to build up. Hasn't really been too far behind in his development, and then just has a really big game to put himself on note. So we like to see that.
Yeah, we'd love to see that, especially for any of these younger players, really taking advantage of their opportunities. On the MRO side of things, Max Heath was fined $2,000 for rough conduct against Tristan Sherry, and that is it for this game. Let's jump over to another big clash. A big clash for the middle of the pack teams, with Collingwood coming up against Carlton at the MCG, and with a 21-point margin, another loss for Josh Fraser, with Collingwood winning out 14-6, 90 to 10-9, 69.
100% loss rate in rounds, ending with 8 or 9 for Josh Fraser. It's just...
I'm not off the Fraser train. I still really like what he's doing.
No, as I said, I think this is just a game where, Carlton's injuries are sort of catching up to them. I think this game actually was closer than the scoreboard indicator. I don't think, flow of play there was that much difference. But I feel like this was the closest thing to a Michael Voss game from Carlton that we saw, where they did get a lot more pressure in territories than they were actually kicking goals. and their forward line just slowed death. Whilst their defense is just starting to get a bit tired, weedering out hurts. Some of the younger players lowered their colours. Well, not lowered their colours. They showed their age, really.
Yeah.
And Collingwood, again, not the most offensive team in the competition. I think made the most of their chances more than, really put on a clinic, especially in that second half. Both teams, I think, moved the ball fairly well, even with okay defensive pressure. As I said, it's just that Collingwood, as I said, had that rare forward line advantage as the old heads in Membry and McStay marked their influences on the prone young defenders. And I reckon this was one of the best games of Bo McCreary. He was running down everyone, great forward pressure, and had a nice couple of goals too to boot. It's very rare you get both from him. Obviously, I think it's hard when you got like those very hard running small forwards. Like by the time you actually get your ground level opportunity, you're often pretty gassed.
Yeah.
And you can miss a lot more. But he was able to convert a couple, and I thought did pretty well. Yeah, as I said, it just seemed like Collingwood get more out of the possession. Pepper Carlton's defense, I don't think they really, they weren't overwhelming them, but they just got them to commit the ground level mistakes that they would capitalise on. Liam Reedy, I thought, came back to some good impacts, but overall, the Blues midfield generation couldn't make up from other areas which they were lacking, as I mentioned, whether through lack of players or, senior players being a bit underwhelming. And who I was referring to with that, there was a couple. Will Hayward had a pretty mediocre game. George Hewitt looked a bit underdone. It didn't help, I'll say that too. Again, unfortunately, Adam Chera picked up an injury and had to be covered for.
Yes.
And, as I said, and that wasn't like huge. You know what I mean? It was just a few players here and there. But, as I said, it was one of those things when you combine it to some of the young players, maybe not having bad performances, but definitely having a few moments mistakes. And those moments mistakes from an experienced team like Collingwood just converted to goals one too many times. As I said, I do think that this game could have been a bit closer. Like, this could have been a 10-point game.
Yeah, I agree.
As I said, it just felt like Collingwood just were always converting and the Blues weren't quite there. Obviously, there was a few players to have a really big game. I thought Darcy Cameron, best game from him from a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Dacos, unfortunately or fortunately, is securing up the Brownlee as we speak. I don't think he'll be that contended with this year, although I do get that wrong most times. So maybe I'm jumping the gun. I don't know. But yeah, for Collingwood, again, for as much as is said about the old heads, like the young players that they do have are playing pretty solidly. Like it's not like they're not having spots on the list for young players to have, and I think there's more teams that aren't. At least this year. Like I know the last couple of years Collingwood haven't really. But I think they have done a good job in realising that. But still keeping the balance of their team. To where they're contending most weeks. The young players have a structure to play with, and it's a car that's humming at the moment. Like it's not racing off. You're not expecting it to get anything more than maybe a finals win if they're lucky. But I still don't exactly want to face Collingwood if I'm, like maybe especially a Victorian team, like if you face Collingwood at the MCG, or maybe if you're like the Cats or something, like they wouldn't want to. I'm just trying to think who wouldn't. I guess St Kilda if they somehow found themselves up there. You know what I mean? It's just Western Bulldogs as well.
Yeah.
It's just they're a respectable team. They're not a good team, but they're very respectable. And I don't think people have been giving them props, especially how consistent they've been, especially this week without Howe and Darcy Moore. They've got positives to come back too.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Fly has recognized that like he's needed to probably blood a little bit more of these younger players.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just to get game time into them, but to learn more from the more like the veteran players that are on field that they may not that they don't really get to play with in the VFL. So getting that veteran experience on the field in an actual AFL level game, I think goes a long way. But also the fact that like you're already playing in a really really solid structure. And you've already got players who are are hitting 100 plus games, like the Dacos boys, and are like are really starting to not necessarily come into their quote unquote peaks because they're still quite young. But like you've got players like Jack Crisp, who has been around for so long now, without injury, might I add. And he's just
That
like
was
one of those sort
insane.
of like he's one of those players that I think is really perfect for some of these younger guys to learn off of because he's probably one of the ideal players to especially learn about like keeping your body healthy throughout these sorts of games purely because of the longevity that he's had without injury.
I think also too, reading an outside contest. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've never seen a team so sure of themselves balancing them like between inside and out
Mm.
because you've got your DeGoes and your Nick Dacos who can go in the contest a bit more. Obviously they're not a big clearance winning team, but they know how to put the pressure on. So even if they don't win the ball that much, they're always in the good shape. Opponents are never really going to capitalize. That's why I always think it was a bit of a uphill battle for Carlton to win this game because
Yeah.
again, Collingwood just. I mean, they still gave up 44 points from stoppage. Like it was a good area from Carlton, but you know what I mean. It's like again from those stoppage, it was 7 goals too. So it was also the beneficiary of some accuracy. I don't think Collingwood were necessarily bad from the stoppage play. It's just as I said, from how weak technically they are as a stoppage team, it doesn't tend to bother them too much. Very much like Adelaide. He probably does have a bit more ball winning ability from that midfield group, but it really depends on the week as well.
Oh yeah.
Uh, but it doesn't matter because, as I said, it always feels like you're not that far away from your opponent.
No.
So yeah,
But I definitely think this injury to Chera really does cause issues for Carlton's midfield because with both Chera and Hewitt out, potentially long term on long term on Hewitt, potentially long term on Chera, and with Harry Mackay ruling himself out, not unsure for how long, but maybe at least a week, does
yeah,
hamper a little bit of their scoring opportunities. Not saying that 10-9 is a bad score, it's still pretty decent conversion, considering it's only one
yeah.
scoring shot less than what Collingwood had. Um,
Mm.
but it's more so, the hopes of them potentially making a wildcard berth does go a little bit
Yeah,
up in the air.
they don't really have anyone that can sort of fill in. Like, the best is like, okay, maybe I mean Brody Kemp just has to stay forward now. Like
Yeah,
there's no going back to defense for him. And they have people like I think Cooper Lord occasionally. Is it Cooper Lord? I think it's Cooper Lord. Um plays as forward, but I think he might be injured too, so yeah, as I said, they've just got some
have
difficulties,
we
but yeah.
not that I've been paying a huge amount of attention to Carlton's list when they play week by week, but have we seen much of the Camporelli boys, or are they still kind of
They haven't. According
developing
to
in the
my friend who
VFL?
supports Carlton, yeah, they haven't really been lighting it up even that much. So, it's a bit of a wait and see. But again, on the outside, not looking to make finals, you might see a Camporelli. Obviously, I think it's Liam, the one that hasn't debuted. But yeah, as I said, the other one too. But it is what it
They
is.
could just like maybe just be trying to get a little bit more time into them on that level as like a more long
Yeah,
term prospect kind of players because I think they're quite on the tall they're on the tall side as well I think so they're probably going to take a
yeah,
little bit
it's
longer to
all
develop
outside.
overall.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, as I said, in this game, it made sense for Blake Acres to come in,
Hmm.
especially as they are still fighting for that wildcard spot. I don't think they'll make it, but they have to try.
Yeah,
Like, you know
absolutely.
what I mean? Like, it would be disrespectful not to. And it's the best way to assess your team coming into next year. It doesn't really look like they're going to get there. It's pretty unfortunate. And yeah, as I said, especially with Harry McKay out, who I don't know, like I found it so weird the commentary around him because I did miss the tiny bit when he was injured, and then they were like talking about him like, oh, he put himself off, oh, like, oh, is he actually injured or not? And then it's like, oh, is going to be out for the rest of the year. It's just like,
Yeah,
I'm just surprised that they
I'm
made
not.
those comments without,
Yeah, it's a little weird.
you know what I mean, being sure.
Like I get
You know,
that
I
the
think,
boundary commentator does get information from the teams in regards to these sorts of
yeah,
situations, but at that
I mean,
time they didn't have scans
live,
to
it can't always
confirm
be accurate
or anything
too.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
so it is a little
and
weird.
it's like, yeah, I actually would like to give the commentators, I don't remember who it was, a bit of a knock because, as I said, like in the age of player welfare and all that, I do think it's very dangerous to be saying, "Oh, Harry McKay's just gone off because he's I don't know, upset or whatever."
Hmm.
When as I said, he's got a serious injury to contend with. As I said, people just they have weird expressions sometimes, especially when you have injuries, because like you're not thinking, "Oh, what's the best face for me to have at this moment?" You're thinking, "Oh, bloody hell, like I really want to play and I've just done my knee." Like, you know what I mean? Like yeah, a lot of young players are shown to be emotional and all that, and it's tough, but when you're older, sometimes you can take it with a bit more of a solemn, less, expressive reaction. And I think that was probably just the case. But yeah, it is a shame, and as I said, hopefully, he's just able to recover. Hopefully get himself right for next year, and take some of this upside that we've been seeing from Carlton
Yeah,
into 2027.
yeah, absolutely. So obviously, as we have just discussed, Harry Mackay left knee injury, Adam Chera right hamstring. Extent of those, potentially season ending, potentially only a couple of weeks. Who knows? That'll be more finalised when injury lists come out. And on the MRO side of things, Patrick Cripps has fined $1,000 for staging.
Yeah, well, this was a fair one. Like, and to be fair, like it was the bad thing is like he was gonna get the free kick anyway. There was no reason to do like a flying nothing afterwards. But I forget the rules. I'm pretty sure you can overturn a free kick because of staging. The
Correct.
umpire decided not to,
That is
which
correct.
in the time, I don't actually mind them. You know what I mean? Like I think it has to be a pretty big flop to have a decision reversed. However, he does deserve the $1,000 fine. You can't be doing that.
Yeah,
So,
no, I completely agree.
yeah.
All right, let's head over now to the West, where it was a very interesting Saturday night clash for the West Coast Eagles against the reigning premiers. With a 24-point margin, Brisbane did win out 13-15-93 to 10-9-69, but the Eagles remained in the game for a majority of the contest.
Yeah, like honestly, I think they've done a really good job of bringing the game into their own terms. But obviously they lack the offensive power to really manage to beat the reigning premiers, who at the same time never really got going. Uh, Again, to give the Eagles some huge credit, and I do think there's a lot good to take from this game. They did live up to the bargain that if they could turn the game into a more ground level focused competition, they will compete and compete hard. And for the first half, they did that beautifully. That's why they had the halftime lead. But slowly throughout this game, the lack of return from their forward entries did open up the kick mark game on the other end of the spectrum for Brisbane. I will say for the Eagles, apart from Yo, who we really just is not fit this season, I'm not going to get into too much of a knock coming back from injury, but like it is arguable whether he should be playing at the moment. It was a really balanced effort by the Eagles. Apart from the key tolls, though, they didn't really have anyone to stamp on their authority in the game. I think Harley Reid also spent a bit of time on the bench for a bit of a knock again. He's picked up not a concussion, but just, he had a bit of time on the bench. Yeah, he had 69% time on ground. So, yeah, he
Nice.
did miss a bit of the game. So, um, you know, uh, but on the flip side, Brisbane were carried by a few of their big performers: Lockie Neal, Harris Andrew, Kai Lohman, and Josh Dunkley. Obviously, those players having big games did lead to a territory advantage, especially when Lockie Neal gets going.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the best at generating offense. But the Eagles' defense did very well in limiting the damage. Bazo continues his solid defensive rise. I think Young had one of his best defensive games of the year. And McCarthy and Duggan intercept and rebounded well, even if Duggan is still a turnover merchant. As I said, that is one of the problems, is that, despite a pretty solid performance, there was still enough intercepts for the Lions to just capitalize on it much. But on the same time, the Lions weren't exactly kicking very well. And against a near bottom team, players from the Lions were still very much limited, and that will be the biggest concern. I do think one of them was thanks to the Eagles. I think Dane Zorko, was reasonable enough, was just very well restricted by Murdoch, who made it his job to restrict his movement. We've seen when he gets restricted, Brisbane's movement tends to struggle a bit more. And yeah, the outside players are very average for Brisbane. I actually thought that West Coast outside midfield was arguably better, depending if you call Zach Bailey an outside midfielder. Again. And unfortunately, Hugh McCluggage is having an all-time drop of form. I only say this because I think this is a bit of an anomaly, and I think he'll get back on the park. But it's almost you almost got to consider resting him for a week. Like this is just if it's
really
not
interesting.
If it's not injury related, then as I said, it almost feels like he needs a reset, and I think it would only take a week. But again, maybe with them still winning, maybe it's just something you don't worry about it. But they are skirting the line, with performances like this. I think they've been pretty good recently. But if this isn't any indication, then maybe they're at a risk of dropping a game and risking their top 4 spot. But as I said, I think Brisbane have proved enough to where they'll get the job done most times in the back end of the season. But this was just pretty good for the Eagles to keep up with them. And even though I don't think there were really any chance by the flow of the game, I do think the Eagles early on were making the most of limited opportunities, and then in the second half they just couldn't get that conversion out of it. I do think, again, like, there's a lot to respect about it. Like, the fact that Brisbane were kept to 13-15, found scoring hard, I do think it was a bit of credit has to go to the Eagles there. And, as I said, when you got players like Oliver Frankau, playing really good games against such a solid midfield unit in the Lions, you can sort of hold your head up high. Herbert had a pretty good game as well. I think Graham also is sort of finding his way back into it. It's sort of weird. Like, I think the Richmond boys of 2025 have sort of taken a bit of maybe not a backward step, but I think it's good for the Eagles overall, where they're still doing their role, but they're not as much having to lead from the front.
I'll
which
be
are
honest,
good, especially for Liam Baker, who is, sort of coming back from injury.
In terms for Fridge, I don't think the footy was the number one thing on his mind this week. Given that it was announced yesterday, I believe it was, that his wife has given birth. So I believe being a newborn father might have been the prominent thing on his mind this week, which is why he probably didn't look the greatest, I would say, in this game.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's a bad
There's a
thing
couple
in
of
terms of
things.
overall, because I think genuinely,
Yeah.
it I guess the veterancy, stepping back a little bit as a veteran player to allow some of the younger players to shine a little bit more and have a little bit more opportunity to really take a lot of the grunt work, which is what he normally does. Harley Reid. Granted,
Yeah.
Harley Reid is always doing a lot of grunt work. That's just him being him.
Yeah.
But like, Murdoch, some of the players off of halfback like McCarthy, Frankau, and all of these other younger players who have come into the system. It is a really good opportunity, and it showed very much in this first half that they can match up to some of the better teams in the competition. They just can't run with them all the way.
Yeah, no, as I said, it's like, I think it was like pseudo running with, where it's like, yeah, they were outclassed, but like, this is when you're not making forward progress, a game where you just sort of like lose, like by a lot. But as I said, like they took it as much as they probably could against the Lions. It's just like on matchup.
Yeah, like
It's
on
not,
matchup, the
it's
Lions.
not a good matchup for the Eagles.
No, the
Like,
Lions are
again,
just
good outside marking
too good.
teams should decimate the Eagles, and they try their hardest not to let that happen. So,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, genuinely, like, as much as we could, sing the Lions' praises all we want because, they are the reigning premiers, two-time premiership team,
Yeah,
of course.
they were fine this game.
I
Very scrappy early on, but got the
I
job
want to
done.
sing the praises of the Eagles because this is
Yeah.
it's such a good showing from them despite the loss because these are the
Mm.
sorts of things we want to see from a young developing team that you can compete with
Yeah.
the best even if you can't, beat them overall. You can still cause headaches. You can still, you can still find avenues to score and just getting that sort of experience against top end talent into your younger
Mm.
players goes a long way to I guess speedrun a development process towards becoming a more competitive team in the long run.
Yeah, and like the Eagles this year, you only need to look at the results where, yeah, they've had a couple of bad losses, but they've been separate.
Yeah,
Like they haven't had back-to-back terrible games, maybe arguably early on, but like, they've always been able to recover. And this is again, we're talking about an Eagles who've lost most of their backline, a backline that was already struggling. And, again, kept the Lions under 100 points. Which again, yeah, it's only just, but in perspective, it wasn't a bad effort. So it is what it is. And I said it was fun. Wasn't perfect for the Eagles. As I said, I don't think even when they were winning, you could sort of see the loss coming.
yeah.
But it was good to see them at least having a bit of hope for the fans. That came and watched them play. I think, as I said, I think if I was an Eagles fan and maybe not going to as many games in 2023, 2024, and so on and so forth, I would consider rocking back up again. This isn't that bad to watch.
No, I
Week
think
in, week out.
comparatively, this has been a very successful season for the Eagles and the perfect step that they've needed in their redevelopment process. However, it has come with an injury this game to Jack Hutchinson with a hamstring. Unsure of severity. Again, we'll wait to see for the injury list. And on the MRO side of things, there's a couple here. Noah Answorth was fined $2,000 for rough conduct against Harley Reid. Liam Baker was fined $1,000 for contact with an umpire. Kyle Lohman fined $1,000 for staging. Logan Morris fined $1,000 for instigating a melee. Weird connection to the show. Red Bazzo fined $1,000 for engaging in a melee, and Liam Baker was also suspended for one match for rough conduct against Cam Rayner.
We know you're listening, Rhett. We're a big fan of you, so please keep our numbers up. But yeah, I said it's it's a bit of a weird one. I didn't actually see the Liam Baker one against Cam Rayner, but
No, neither did I. But I mean, if it's worthy of one match, it's worthy of one match. My hands are off on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of a developing team that is not matching up well to the top end talent of the competition, we head over to our Sunday games, where Richmond hosted Hawthorn at the MCG, and with a 70-point margin, despite a fairly commendable fourth quarter, Hawthorn absolutely demolished the Tigers, 18-14, 122 to 6, 16-52. I'm at least Tom Lynch got his 500th goal finally that he's been sitting on since Dreamtime.
Yay.
But this was not a good showing. I only really saw the second half because I was at work.
Oh, that's good.
But yeah, I already knew the damage was done. The only thing I can really say is that I think our fourth quarter was fairly solid. I'm very glad that our fourth quarters have been fairly commendable this year. But that's everything else that I saw was absolutely horrid.
Yeah, look, from all accounts, and I think I vaguely watched seconds of this game before I realized that there was nothing really to come from investing time in it. Because Richmond to start were pretty much dreadful, unfortunately. It was only junk time goals that made this respectable. Before Hawthorn arguably put the cue in the rack in halftime. Going from being completely dominant with possession to letting Richmond get hands on ball in the second half, where Richmond were wasteful when they got it anyway. The forward line against the Hawks was always going to be a tough task. do think that there was some signs of effort in the second half. But really, it was the chasm that the backline has fallen into that really sunk any chance of Richmond winning lately or even getting a bit of hope. And has sort of, dampened Richmond trying to get a bit of late season optimism. It's been a rough few weeks.
Yeah, I do want to give a little bit of praise to Nathan Broad for being able to keep Gunston quiet. But letting Mitch Lewis and Nick Watson run rampant is not a good look for that back line.
Yeah, well, as I was saying in the first half, it was like 5 goals to Lewis, 3 goals to Watson each. And, as I said, whilst there were some resistance in the second half, it was really just for Tigers fans who watched it or, turned it off. It's really just like deciding how much of this is a moot point because, as I said, I think in this last half of the season, again, you can take some things away from, what they're trying to do, figuring out their forward line. But, again, a 3-year team, I know they've got some injuries and, I'm not going to give them too much of a knock, but I do think that this is less than what Uze would be expected to organise as a defence. Like, they haven't always been as bad as they have been. And it's really not... I mean, it's hard because I haven't really dissected... Like, in the games of Richmond have been flogged, I've turned it off. So it's hard for me to say, okay, they need to do this, and this. But, like, I think even, like, as a positive Richmond supporter like yourself, like... what's been going in the back half is nearing alarm bell stages. Whereas the rest, you can sort of just shrug your shoulders.
Yeah, I think
the midfield's never been terrible. The forward line, has been some teething issues with injuries, but the back line is just,
The big issue that I have coming out of this week, and it has nothing to do specifically with the back line or with the midfield, or technically, it has primarily to do with the forward line. Why would you take out Jasper Olga, who kicked 13 goals in 6 games, coming and produce basically nothing in front of the goal, in front of the goals? Like,
wait, isn't this the second time where Olga's been dropped after multiple goals?
Yes, indeed.
Damn.
I don't understand. I get that we didn't have enough, ground ball frontline pressure, which is why Steely Green was brought in. Like, he's been fairly solid at that, even if it hasn't equated to score. But why would you take out basically your leading goal scorer,
3 behinds,
to produce 0 score afterwards? Like, I don't get it. Otherwise, outside of that, from what I did see, there were some fairly solid performances from mostly our midfield players. I think Dion Prestia in his 250th had a fairly decent game. Tim Taranto, always standing up. I am a big fan of that. It was good to see Sam Lawler again, 17 touches and a goal. I'm very, very glad he got some game time in, even with limited minutes.
Yeah.
It was his
champion data. His disposal impact was through the roof.
Yeah. So I'm very glad to see him get some senior game time again. It was his first game playing with Taj Houghton since they both were drafted together. So it was very good to see them play together. It has been confirmed that Taj's injury was just a rolled ankle, so nothing major. He'll be fine. I'm very glad of that. Patrick Retko continues to have a standout season. Generally, I think he's probably pretty high up in our Jack Dyer medal. I would not be surprised if he potentially wins that.
Missing a few games. I think it would have to go to Taranto.
I would say it'd probably go to Taranto or Prestia. I think since Prestia came back from injury earlier in the season, he's played every game fairly well.
Yeah.
But I think Retko is definitely like a sneaky top 5.
Yeah.
I think Hugo Ralsmith had a fairly decent game on the wing. But outside of that, like, there was not really any major highlights. Otherwise.
No, and like Hawthorn were really good. Like Jarman Impey has been doing really well without Amon. Not that he was doing particularly bad without him, but you know what I mean? It's just like like they've had no problem in their back half while he's been out. He's just taken more of the load and been fine with it. Lloyd Meek, I think, had a pretty fun battle against Nankervis.
They normally do. It's like the
interesting side plot.
The Sherry, Gorn, Meek, Nankervis kind of quartet. It's always a fun battle whenever those 4 sort of match up into each other. I do want to sing
Although
the
the
praises
rocking highlight,
of
I
I
was
do
going
want
to
to
say
sing the
that,
praises of Massimo D'Ambrosio once again because I think he's
yeah.
been a little bit underrated since coming back in from his minor injury earlier in the season. But he had a really standout game this week on the Hawthorn side of things, which is really good.
I was going to say Noah Mraz actually had the tap out highlight, having a Nick Natanui-esque run from the middle, which is pretty funny because again, more just pinch hitting. I'm not really sure why Chol decided not to ruck late. I guess it was just Mraz was just like, okay, we want to get you into the game. We're going to give you a few late hit outs, and he actually did all right. So a nice little chance for Hawthorn to move some pieces again. Unfortunately for Richmond, it does sort of suggest that they were at that point thinking that the game was like at that stage where you could just do whatever within reason. Obviously, they weren't going to like. I guess they could put Moraes as a key forward, but you know what I mean. They're not just doing things for fun, but like at the same time, it was the perfect opportunity to do stuff like that. So, yeah.
Do you think he was slightly robbed for a potential rising star nom this week, or is it like just it is what it is, considering the
As
game that we have to talk about coming up?
I think Miraz was solid enough. I think it's just in that game. I think we're getting to that point where some bodies of work are being considered, and I think that the winner that we will talk about it is so deserving. When it will come to the end of the year.
Oh, great.
But yeah, you can definitely argue that Miraz had a better game. This one. Actually, sure, Miraz is a rookie. I think he might be a mid-season pickup though, so I'm not too sure.
Actually, I'm not
No
too sure of that
Miraz.
either, to be honest. That is something very interesting to find out about. As you find out about that, on the injury side of things, again, Taj Houghton did do an ankle. Thankfully, it is a rolled ankle, so he will be okay.
Hmm.
Steely Green is out with concussion, so will not play against the Dogs this week. And Jack Ginnivan ruled himself out a little earlier in the game with back soreness. But he might need a bit some extra time to look after that because we do not want bad backs in this competition.
Yeah, so for Miraz, 2024 draftee, so maybe eligible. Only played 2 games last season, so
Would still
or
be
1 game
eligible. I
last
think he's
season.
still underneath the age threshold, so
He's
he should be
20.
alright.
Yeah, I think the age threshold is he can't be over 22 or something.
Yeah,
So
like 21, 22,
yeah.
something like that.
Anyway, again, it's below 22 and it's 1 or 2 or first or second season. So
Alright.
again, fine.
Alright. Let's jump over now to our second Sunday game up on the Gold Coast where the Suns hosted the Bulldogs. And with a 9-point margin, the Dogs handed the Suns their 8th straight loss 11-11-77 to 9-14-68.
And it's probably so Gold Coast where a lot of people just have stopped caring.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like,
pretty much.
I've never seen a team perform so badly and people just like, oh, okay. I guess they're out of finals now. Like, I mean, it's being talked about, but like,
I think
geez.
mathematically it's still possible, but it's not going to happen.
They're not going to make finals. Anyway, so look, I think both these teams weren't in great form. Bulldogs have probably gotten more wins on the board, but they've definitely been going through a rough patch through injuries. And this would have been a touch frustrating watch for both franchises. I think there was effort at least for both teams, but there was clear deficiencies as the Bulldogs struggled with consistent team effort, whilst the Gold Coast forward half just kept misfiring from decent territory wins. And Gold Coast had a clearance win. They had nearly 100 possessions more, 10 more inside 50s, and they still managed to do nothing much of value with them. The Bulldogs were almost just as bad, with terrible ball movement and terrible ball use. But the Bont really pulled out a game-winning performance, and Matthew Kennedy made up for some lacking forward line work. Matthew Kennedy also had a baby this weekend, so congratulations to him. I caught the post-match interview where they were talking about it, and yeah, pretty
That's
good
very
work there.
sweet.
Yeah, I think Tuk Tuk had a solid game, but also exemplified Gold Coast problems, as all of their handballing was just shifting pressure and clogging up space. Like, again, like this was, you know, if you were to give me a blueprint of how to make a midfield with like good stats but bad output, it would be Gold Coast in this game. Even if their performances weren't as bad as some of the others. Like their worst performer was Petrarca by a mile, and even he got a couple of junk time goals just to pretend like he did something. Yeah, otherwise, yeah, it was the same issues with the Sun. They did nothing to stop the Bulldogs midfield, even with the minor injury to Ed Richards.
Yeah, it's a little concerning that like this they weren't able to touch the Dogs really at all. Basically, like sure, it says
Mm,
the game says it's a very close game, close margin, but when you look at it, like
yeah.
when you actually watch the game, it's like we've talked about this all season long already. It's like the Suns are just a shadow of their former selves from last season. Like there's just nothing substantial there anymore, and it's so weird, especially when you come up against a team like the Dogs, who have usually been like one of the best midfield teams in the competition. Maybe a little bit weaker in these past couple of weeks due to injury,
Mm.
but are still like do still have avenues of vulnerability, and the Suns just have not been able to capitalize on any of that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, as you mentioned, like, despite the close bit of the game, it's like the Bulldogs, I think, had. Well, it's hard because I don't think the Bulldogs were good at all, to be honest. Like, I think they had. The Bulldogs at least had a couple of consistent best. Like, the first quarter was just a write off. Like, that was just not that great footy. 1-2 to 2-2. Both teams just mucking around with it.
Yeah,
I do think the Suns had a solid bit of resilience when they hit the lead in that second quarter. And, they were playing some all right football at times. And then they just folded. Didn't had a goalless third quarter when the game was there to be won, and then just didn't kick a goal until halfway through the fourth when the Bulldogs had a cushy 28-point lead. I must admit the Bulldogs were trying to hold the game up when they had no right to. Like I said, it's not like they were winning possession or anything. Like the Bulldogs almost lost it just by playing a defensive game that they weren't suited to. Come very late. I think Bevel will have a few words on how to keep on attacking if you're not really, holding the ball up. As I said, at least the Bulldogs were, you know, maybe had 1.5 good quarter. It just wasn't a good game, to be honest. Like,
yeah,
if you're like looking at this game, like looking at a team that needed to win, it's like, okay, yeah, the Bulldogs. If you're like looking for a team that could do some sort of damage in the finals, it's no one. Like this was, I do think the Bulldogs have capabilities of playing better football, but like this was just one where, form and injuries sort of caught up to them. I think whilst there were some good things, Tim English obviously having a fantastic game.
mm-hmm.
Rory Lobb also then played a good role in defence. It was just concerning how top heavy the Bulldogs were. Like Bont, English, Williams, Kennedy. Richards had a few moments. Was if he played the whole game, he would have been up there. But then it's a bit of a gap. Like you had Selwood, solid performance for what it was. Obviously Lobb. Sanders had a few moments, and then everyone else was just like up and down. It's just for the Suns, like yeah, they probably had more even performances, but their forward half was just and even some of the goals they got, like Bailey Humphries, like he kicks a brilliant goal, and you're like, oh, he's on again, like this is going to be a game where he lifts a bit, and then he's just pretty much unsighted for the rest of the game.
Yeah,
Ben Long, he is just so horrendously out of form. Like, honestly, if Gold Coast are to make changes, they would be asking the question, like, how long will they play building a game sort of around Ben Long? Because again, his bat is just so he just doesn't have enough influence when they're doing badly that I don't think you can afford to play him if it's a rebuild sort of situation.
yeah,
And I know that's a bit harsh to say for Gold Coast, but they are a young team. Like, yeah, again, they bring in Petrarch or whatever, but like, they've still got some things to figure out. Like, it's not out of the question that they're maybe just like a bit in rebuilding territory, but they're not going to be super terrible. Like, they've been terrible this season, don't get me wrong, but you know what I mean? It's like, okay, maybe they can normalize a bit, work out what they need to do to get to playing competitive football. But they're still playing some young players, showing a few signs.
You could
Adinasaur, I thought, had some good moments. Murray had some good moments. Lombard has looked absolutely fantastic this year for how bad Gold Coast
Oh,
football has
agreed.
been.
Leo Lombard has been such a bright shining star for this team so far this
Yeah.
season. There is a one way if you want to try and look at this sort of positively for the Suns, you can kind of look at this as like the 2015, like as like the 2016 in Richmond's premiership era gap. Like 13, 14, 15, they made finals those 3 years but got knocked out right away. 16 fell off a little bit, and then obviously 2017 won the premiership. I'm not saying that the Suns will win the premiership next season, but I'm saying like this could just be like that little dip in between. Like they finally got the monkey off their back of making finals. Now they go a bit of a dip. Granted, it's a huge dip in terms of performance. But then next season they could very much shoot back up and become back in that sort of finals contention team.
On the flip side, though, we've also seen Carlton and St Kilda do this, where they've like gotten into a finals 1-1, looked positive, and then just like overestimated where their lists at, and haven't reached finals for a good chunk since. So
yes, that is also true.
I think the Gold Coast, I must have to say, is like, I think they've got to take this step back as a reassessment. Like, they can't say, oh, we got our job done with our one final win and all that, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, this season we have to take it for what it is. We have to reassess, and we have to make sure that we're still assessing and building around the players that you actually have on the park.
Yeah.
Because as I said, you can't build around. I mean, you can obviously build around Ben King and all that, but you can't build around this forward line the way it is at the moment. Like, they got away with it last year. Like, I don't think their forward line last year on paper was that good, but they were finding more options. But
yeah, they were.
This year they haven't. So it is what it is. But as I said, even the Dogs, who have looked very vanilla, at least they have an identity of being that strong inside midfield team that will just beat you in the forward half and pray that their defense holds up. Whereas, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, the Gold Coast Suns have good players in each part of their system, but like this year, they're not playing from their defense. Like, their defense has been exposed. They're not playing from their midfield, and they're definitely not playing from their forward line. So it's like, where are they playing from? And like right now, it just they're existing just to gain possession,
pretty much,
not to play a system that's conducive of winning football. They've lost their identity, and we did see it. Like last year, you could argue that it was run through the halfback, and Noble had a good game. Like, that's fine, but like, they're not really playing the same sort of intercept halfback game. Like, that's dried up. It's not sustainable. They've got to go back to square one.
Yeah.
And, just for final things, I thought Will Power played all right. Ned Moyle, again, he's been playing so... Like, in pure tap work, he beat English. Around the ground, English was better, sure. But, like, he did beat English in the taps. And that was pretty cool.
The Suns have a really good development rock on their team. And, like, that's going to go a long way for them with Jared Witts. Getting on in age a little bit and just being out of form here and there, it definitely goes a long way already.
But like Ned Moore, like it wasn't just a rock thing. It was 43 hit outs, 17 to advantage. He did have 21? Sorry, not 21. 12 more ruck hit outs than Tim English, who got 20 hit outs 4 to advantage. But it's still a win nonetheless.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It did create that clearance win. For Gold Coast. So yeah.
There was a comment. Not that I really talk about what coaches say in their presses and stuff. But there was a comment that made around the rounds from Dimmer last week saying that he kind of used the season already as season over. And whilst I disagree because of the fact there's still, at the time there were 6 games left, now there's 5 games left, but I do kind of get it where like he's
Yeah.
trying to figure out what the root of the problem is as to why they're not performing and plan for it, maybe personnel wise, maybe systemic wise, for next season instead. Because I don't know. I don't like. Again, I disagree with the statement because there's still plenty of games left to be played. There's still opportunities for them to make finals again, but I kind of get the reasoning for it.
The thing I don't get about it is like, yeah, sure, you can make that comment if you're making like some really tough calls or, you know, like shuffling out some players that have been underperforming. But like,
he's still playing the same sort of players.
They haven't.
Yeah.
Like, it's the same core. They're trying to get like results, you know. I mean, it's literally just, you know, just shoving it in until it works. And like for this season, it hasn't. And, you know, I think, like, how would you feel if you were a Suns player in the twos at the moment? And maybe they don't care, to be honest, but like, you said it's like, oh, the season's over, you know, we're looking to like, you know, and we're like underperforming, but yet you're still not good enough to make it into this side. You know what I mean? It's like, well, like there's a lot of players that have like really got their list spot a bit, you know, in question. But you know, and I said, and you know, and the flip side, if you're not, if you just don't think they're like good enough, or like you think that your players have at least some capacity, because it's not like the Gold Coast had the hardest schedule going into the end of the season, and this was a winnable game on paper.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's just like you can't just not believe on the players that you send in. Like, to every degree, if you're even somewhat relative to finals, even if it's mathematicals, you should be saying you're pushing to win. And yeah, there's a lot I haven't liked recently about Dimmer Hardwick at the Gold Coast Suns. I'm not sure what has to give. But yeah, as I said, it's just one of those situations. Like a team we're going to talk about, who has had a bit of positivity happened recently, that we're just sort of like, you know, if you're not going to do something, at least find some positivity, you know, something to build on.
Yeah.
And it's just not much I've seen from that Gold Coast performance that's like, we're going to build on something. That was just like, okay, we're keeping with a team really not firing at the moment.
So is it... And that just begs the question, and we'll answer, and we'll get probably more clear answers on this in the off season. But is it an on-field issue, like as in terms of their systemic structure? Is it a coaching personnel issue? As much as I don't want to talk trash about my former Richmond boys being coaching staff under Dimmer, you know. There's a lot. I think
we've all agreed.
There's a lot of words going around about
some interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look.
This isn't including the fact that their list manager has a thing with a betting club. I don't want to get into the whole thing of that. I still think that's like a whole mess in of itself.
It's a bit shady.
But yeah. Especially when we literally had an umpire a couple of weeks ago. You know, with the whole Zach Butters thing. So
yeah,
it's
more than a couple of weeks ago, but
you get my point. Like that whole thing needs to be separated to begin with. Anyway,
in recent memory.
Yeah. But like,
no, I get you.
Is his assistant coaches an issue? Is it because the way that I saw, and I don't mean to kind of always kind of go back to our premiership era, but the way that I saw our premiership seasons is that like 13, 14, 15 were alright. We did enough. But when the 16 dip happened, we had a decent clear out of our assistant coaches and brought in some newer, clearer eyes. And I think that made such a huge difference. Obviously, because we won premierships. Yeah. So like, is that sort of something that they need to look at? Is the people around Dimmer, not necessarily Dimmer himself? Like, what? I will say this. What other issues are there?
I think there's been. I'm not saying there's been. Like, I don't think Dimmer should not get focused on it, because I do think he's said some baffling things. There's been some questionable decisions. And I will say...
It could be I do think some of his negativities... medicinal tobacco that he's on. Who knows?
Oh yeah, I said I don't know, but like I think that even if you take a step back from that, I think all three, systems of the coaching, or systems of the club aren't firing. Like their players don't seem to have that much cohesion together. Um, you know, I think that from what I've heard, like some of the decisions they've done off the field, haven't really been of the players or the coaches' interest. And then you've got Dimmer, who is, as I said, is a coach that you take the good with the bad at this point. But
Yeah.
like they've gone all in on a coach that they've not really come out and support him either way. You know what I mean? It's like Gold Coast. I feel like Gold Coast are almost like put their fingers in their ears. You know what I mean? And it's just like, oh, it's a bad year. We made finals last year. I'm sure we'll all be fine. You know what I mean? Like
I
it
mean, to
doesn't
be,
seem to me that they're being that
I find it really
proactive or
interesting.
that reflective.
I find it
You
really
know?
interesting too in the fact that Dimmer's only in his third season at the Suns,
Mm.
and comparatively, Uze is only in his third season at the Tigers. And yet Uze is getting so much more scrutiny for with a rebuilding side than Dimmer is getting with a team full of superstars.
I haven't really been hearing much from
It's
Uze, but again, you live in Melbourne, so
Yeah,
um,
there's a lot of noise online when it comes to it, and I'm sick of it. But
fair enough.
it's a weird comparison that I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think you got one more year with Uze. Like if the defense is as bad as it was like that game,
It's
like like next year, I would be concerned. But
I don't
like,
mean to kind of go on a big tangent outside of this game, but like I don't think it's a coach issue. I don't even think it's a like an actual like like team strategy or whatever sort of issue.
yeah,
I think it's just the fact that we have an aging backline that is going to have wholesale
mm,
changes very soon, regardless.
yeah,
With Broad probably retiring end of this season or going to West Coast, Nick Vlauston's probably only got 1 or 2 years left anyway.
mm,
Jaden Short, he's pushing 30, I'm pretty
yeah.
sure, so he'll only have a couple years left. Like we're gonna have to start rotating a lot more in that backline anyway. So it's regardless of
I think
whether they just
yeah,
keep having bad performances or whatever, the whole thing is going to get
mm.
changed within the next year or two, regardless.
But like the thing with Richmond is like you can see what they're trying to do. Like again, this is like it would be unfair to compare him to like Damien Hardwick because again, this is like a Chris Scott sort of situation. It's like, okay, you haven't got the performances, but you're here to steer a rebuild, and you've had the worst of it in terms of injuries. So it's like, as long as you're hitting whatever internal benchmarks, I'm not really too fast. I think that as I said, I do think like it does become a point where you have to make a change at some point, and like if it was as bad next year, I think you do. Because I think what happens if you start to go on these players, like development just gets halted, and those
Agreed.
players that you think are going to be like taking the next step end up just being cast off and needing to have their positions filled, and you're back to square one. Sort of like we saw how the Eagles went from like 2020 to 2022, and then the second sort of rebuild within their rebuild. So yeah, so again, but
Hey,
like Gold Coast,
we
like
love a bit of
this, like
rebuildception.
yeah, exactly. But like Gold Coast, like they're just
Ah,
again, they're. I think there's just like the fact is like they really, really wanted people to care about them, but they weren't willing to deal with the consequences of not reaching that. They were just
yeah,
expectant. And this whole season reeks of
and
expectancy.
you can
And,
not to kind of
and
take away from your
yeah,
point, but it's like you kind of expect that out of the Suns, right? Because even right from the
yeah,
beginning of their integration into the AFL, they were
mm,
like treated as this like favorite child of the AFL kind of club, and then
yeah, the
and
one that's
then they
trying, but like never quite does anything.
yeah, and then obviously GWS was brought in, who whilst got
Mm,
a huge amount of concession picks to actually build their club and had these huge amount of superstars to begin with, and actually were a decent team basically from the get-go, and then rebuilt themselves and still continue to be a decent team, give or take. They were not praised as like the favorite child of the AFL. They actually had to work hard.
They worked hard with what they had. Yeah, and look, as the GWS have always had, like, and we're going to talk about them in the second, which is sort of funny, where
Yes,
they've had some baffling situations in terms of like not quite being able to be as good as their potential. But like they've been really solid off season. They've always moved on players when they've needed to be moved on. They've never stuck around too much with middling players. Obviously, there's a bit of that this season, but even then, like, as I said, they've had to deal with a chunk of injuries, so they're dealing with not the best part of their list. So, whereas the Gold Coast, as I said, they're just being like expectant, and like the thing is like as much as you can say about the superstars, it's like where's the improvement from like that middle chunk of the list? Like Daniel Rioli, he's been very middling this season. Like Bodie Ulan's probably been okay. But we've seen Sam Closey, like he was a player that was developing. He was an outside player that could have added, and he's not even getting into this side.
Yeah.
Like that's a drop off. Like that's a player that you would have hoped to have been better by now, and instead, we're playing Zeke Uland, who's either really, really good or not much influence at all. So as I said, it's just, Joel Jeffrey's another one. Oscar Adams, maybe is a bit younger, but like, Bailey Humphries, Jed Walters, like they're all players that, you talk about the superstars letting you down, but like, they're still not that much around, they definitely could be fielding a more potent team every week because they don't have that much injury either.
No.
Like, this is what they're planning to put out every week, and it's just not good.
Yeah, it's just not good. Speaking of not good, I'm going to use this as a transition. We were kind of going a little too long on the Suns, as we have been for the past couple of weeks, and rightly so, to be fair. But we need to move on. So, in our last game of the round at Marvel Stadium, where the Bombers hosted the Giants, and from being slayers of the top of the table to being slayed by the bottom of the table, the Bombers won out by 3 points, 10-7, 67 to 8-16, 64, with former Essendon Bombers player Jake Stringer kicking 7 behinds to give the Bombers the win.
I mean, I guess he wasn't their worst player, to be fair, but like...
It's one of the best games he's ever played for the Bombers, let's just say that.
Yeah, well, as I said, and I don't know if you saw the stat, but it is actually the quickest turnaround from beating a top team to losing to a bottom of the ladder, getting the record of 15 days. Apparently it was only a 6-day turnaround from the other way around, or something like that.
Let me quickly double check that. But
losing to the bottom of the ladder, then beating the top.
Something like that, yeah, because it was fairly recently that they beat Freo, right?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, it was literally. It was a Saturday game, Saturday, July 4th to Sunday, July 19th. So that's like
it wasn't Freo losing against
just
West Coast.
It's just over 2 weeks.
Yeah. Oh, okay, for this one, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other way around, it was, I think, Freo losing to West Coast and then beating whoever was on top of the ladder at the time. I can't quite remember. But anyway,
this was last year, right? When they just randomly dropped the derby?
No, it was a couple of years back.
But, okay.
Anyway, again, 2 step forwards and a giant step back. The Dons get their first week a win under Solomon in, honestly, the way that you would expect. In that it wasn't pretty, it was very scrappy, and it wasn't fully even in their control. But it was a moment's victory, and at least the Dons took their moments, which is way more than you can say about the Giants. The Giants, pretty much crapped themselves with the ball use in their forward half under perfect roofed conditions.
Mm-hmm.
How they kicked 8-16 and had pretty poor general ball use as well. It's not like their field kicking was overly that good. It was very much the Giants playing down to competition. The Dons offense struggled too. 10-7 was like nice, but like they had very 17 scoring shots is very low for winning in a roofed game all the same. Nate Caddy also was out early, experienced elevated heart rates before the Dons fans would get elevated heart rates later in the game. Apparently he's fine. This is just one of those things similar to Ollie Wines, where you just have to monitor it where it happens. So we're wishing him all the best.
Yes.
But he should be fine, hopefully. Still, the Giants defense would be asking what more could they do, because they were decent clamping defense. Okay, back half movement. Like the back half players weren't the reason, but they were just not getting much in return. Like good back half movement to poor forward half movement. It's just, yeah, it's half a game. Unfortunately, it doesn't lead to many goals being kicked. Again, Solomon is slowly learning that merit makes for a decent midfielder.
I love that
With
line.
the clearance numbers.
So I was
well
going to
being
mention it
with the
before you brought it up,
Dons.
but like I genuinely love that line so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost as like he's been playing a midfielder for his whole career.
Like who knew that, you know,
Yeah.
somewhat Brownlow medalist, somewhat not Brownlow medalist Zach Merritt is, you know, one of the best midfielders in the competition. Who had any idea?
Zach Merritt hasn't won a Brownlow.
No, he hasn't. But I feel he's one of those players who probably should have at this point.
Yeah, maybe. If Dons were good, he probably would have. Anyway, Clarence Munn was clearly going to the Dons. But it was a lack of respect shown to Nick Bryan that really hurt GWS, as they did nothing in the ruck or the clearances. GWS were putrid in the middle, and we know that they've got issues there, but like honestly, they've been okay. Like they've had some lesser performance, but they haven't been like outright smacked in a while like this. And although again, it didn't lead to as many points, but like, you know, as I said, like they still only got 3-4 from stoppage against Essendon's midfield, which has been pretty bad in stopping stoppages from going to score. I mean, they're pretty bad in stopping any score, but you know, as I said, you know, if you're only scoring 4-12 off turnover, you have to get a bit more from stoppage.
Oh yeah.
You know. Yeah, so anyway. Nick Bryan, though, he also kicked a goal and played one of his best games for his career. For the Dons, it wasn't ground-shattering, but they will take away... what they will take away from this is that the young players sealed the win with their hard-fought moments. I think the Daywick's El Akar play... It'll probably be the like most highlighted play from this Dons season. It was scrappy. I do think there was an easier line to goals if they made a bit more from their possession.
Mm-hmm.
But they were like, you know what? We're not in a position where we're being the cleanest. But two players just had big moments. Daywick's getting that hard contested mark when it really could have been intercepted. It was a pretty shocking kick, really. And then El Akar, you know, refused to give up on a play, gets a on the ball, and gets the Essendon players in front. And that just sort of summed up the game. You know, it was through effort, and it wasn't through clean play. But, like, you know, if Essendon, you know, are so far away from winning, you know what I mean? It's like, at least they do something when the doors ajar for them. Like, they could have lost this. You know, as I said, this is just a game where we're always expecting the Giants to come back, and they definitely had a lot of opportunities to. Like I said, like, A16, like, there were some tough shots through that. Like, it's not like it's... I mean, okay, it is indefensible A16, but, like, you know what I mean? It's not like it was, like, the worst X-score performance or whatever.
Yeah.
But I do think that, you know, like, it just capped off some of the crapness that was going on, like, throughout this game. Like, even if you took the goal shooting aside, it's not like the Giants, anywhere outside of their back line, was doing anything of note. You know, it's like, oh, maybe they have a few players that Jack O had a good game. But yeah, as I said, there was a lot of, you know, pretty mediocre performances.
Yeah.
Especially in that forward line. You know, it's like, yeah, Cullen Brown, you know, had a pretty good game as a backup ruck. You know, he only kicked a goal, but like, I must admit, you know, they were like looking for someone to, you know, better compete against Nick Bryan, and he actually looked like the most likely contender against him. I thought Nick Madden just looked, I mean, pretty bad, unfortunately. I'm not going to knock him as a young player, but like, he
Well,
just wasn't up
yeah,
to snuff.
definitely
Um,
wasn't any one of his best games. Yeah,
no,
it's just really weird. I mean, as
I
I've
mean,
been
it's just
saying it
the
kind of all
giant.
season long, like
Yeah.
GWS and St Kilda, two of the most inconsistent teams in the competition, and this just continues to prove it.
I will say St Kilda's had that mantle taken off them. I think St Kilda's been
I they've been a lot
consistent this
better this season in terms of their consistency, but I still think that they will drop games to the most random of teams.
Who did they drop this year, though? I think they've actually beaten most teams below them this year.
I don't have any off the
I
top of
don't
my
think
head.
that there's
But
any upset loss.
they probably have. I just cannot think of any off the top of my head right now.
They haven't had too many wins above them. That's been like their main criticism. But
Which is fair enough. Again, like they're playing more to their level than rather than trying to play above.
Yeah, but no, that's what I said. It's like that's the difference between St Kilda last 2 years and this year. It's like they've found at least a game plan where they know what they're getting out of their players each week. Whereas, as I said, GWS, and to be fair, again, a long injury list. But it's just so weird to see players like 1 week they'll have exactly what they need to get the job done, and then another week they just don't. Like, and it's not just like, okay, they can compete. Like, no, they will just like take down a team, look dominant, score so many points in a quarter, whatever. Like, it's so baffling, this feast or famine side of it, because it's not like most feast or famine where they're like doing against bottom teams or whatever. It's just like, it's literally whatever the weather is. You know what I mean? It's like,
I feel like
it's however they wake out of bed. It's not a matchup thing. Like, like Essendon, they'll literally give you anything.
For the Giants, it's a mentality thing, and I think that's the crux of it. Not necessarily. I think for the forwards, it's definitely it's very much like obviously Stringer kicking 0-7 against your former side. That's a very big sort of mental game right there. But it's just like to play this sort of game against a team that is on paper a lot worse than you in a lot of metrics really just shows either there's a mental block and a lot of pressure when it comes to like these sorts of weird matchup games where they will just randomly drop it, or it's part of their system that's a bit of an issue, and that could play more into the injury side of things. Like again, their injury list is a little bit substantial right now, but it's really hard to kind of quantify it. Like, and again, that also comes into the fact that you want to be supporting these players in terms of their mental health and stuff like that. You don't want to let these sorts of things actually like hurt them. But there is definitely some sort of mental block for the veteran players that is very much getting in the way of these sorts of weird, inconsistent games.
Yeah, and I think it can't always go to the players. I think that's where it goes to list building. You know what I mean?
That's true.
It's like you've got to make sure that you have enough leaders in certain areas to not have this sort of thing. And Stringer, as I said, like since day one, he's the cherry on top sort of player.
Mm-hmm.
And it was justified last year where they were. And not knocking the move, but this is where it hurts you when you do have a worse year, whether it's through to injuries or, unexpected or whatever. Whereas, as I said, like a player like Stringer, it sort of almost hurts to play if you're anywhere near a rebuild.
Sorry, the MRO finally came in for the Sunday game.
Oh,
that took so long. Yeah. Normally it was out like an hour ago. Anyway, I will touch on that in a moment. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah. So, so as I said, what I was saying there is, but the one thing I do want to point out is their backline, are they wasting a premiership backline? Like, that's the thing, because, again, when they were competing, like, you know what I mean? Like, it was a bit of a shame that, they had a few injuries and all that, and, they look to be coming up. But now, I'm not too sure if they'll get their forward line and midfield lined up. And by the time that I think they do, I think that we'll see the end of players like, maybe not Buckley, but we'll obviously see the end of Sam Taylor's career going into the end of that. Player like Harry Himmelberg will be approaching his end of the days. So, it'll be a bit of a shame if they don't get back on track next year. I do hope that they do, but like, as I said, because I do think that this is a premiership defense. I do think they're being let down by everywhere else in the field. But yeah, as I said, I mean, it was sort of like Port last year. Like, we see the improvement just when you get a moderate amount of effort and pressure being applied to prevent ball movement. But yes, Giants just don't have that at the moment. So, yeah, we'll wait and see. But yeah, as you now get all your info, do you want to head through the supplementary info for the game and the Sunday games?
Before I do, I just want to
Oh yeah, right.
I just want to kind of just go back on the Jake Stringer thing because it wasn't last week, but it was I think it was the week before where we talked about when they played against Freo that we highlighted that he finally remembered how to be the package. The nickname that he was given at the Bombers, where he was just this cherry on top sort of player, and it feels like even though his time at the Bombers came with a lot of inconsistency, not just in his form, but he did suffer through a lot of injuries at the Bombers, which hampered a lot of his career. But this game was very much like a inverse cherry on top. Like he was actually at the base of the cake rather than at the top of the cake because it's such a weird system that they have, and again I don't know what to really expect out of the Giants anymore, especially going into the last 5 games of the season. You wanna hope that they're still trying to at least vie for this wildcard spot, but there's so much they need to try and deal with first before they even have a chance. And considering their run home is not the hardest, but also isn't the easiest either. There is definitely some opportunity for them to still make it, but it's gonna get harder if they keep putting up performances like this.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Do you want to start off with a good bit of news thingy before we get into the injuries?
Yes, before I cover the injuries and the MRO, the rising star did come out of this game, and that is young Dyson Sharp.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been solid for a while. Obviously, big moment this game, kicked a very clutch goal, and 23 disposals, 5 tackles, 3 marks, 12 contested possessions, and 7 clearances. It was a pretty solid match. Again, he's been asked to do a bit more on return. He's been playing mainly outside, but he's had a few more midfields in. And look, this is a thing where, again, when we're talking about Merritt taking a bit less time out of the midfield, I don't mind him taking 50 and all that percent and spending a bit of time with Sharp. It's just you know what I mean? It's when the games where it's had 3 or 5% CBAs where you just go, huh? But yeah, at least Dyson Sharp has made the most of his extra time in there. And they've got a few players that they've been doing that with. With Sullivan Roby being a bit of an everywhere player for the Dons. We've seen him take the inside midfield, and he even played up forward as well. So he's been up forward in the midfield halfback. So as I said. But overall, Dyson Sharp, he's been fantastic all year. He would be a rising star contender if it wasn't for his injury midway through the season. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think he's been maybe not under the radar, but I think this had his props. But I think he's definitely a player that Essendon fans should be saying we can build around this guy.
They have, as much as we us in the media and all that harp on about the inconsistency of the Bombers and all of their losses on all of that. Again, this is their first win in Victoria since May last year. It's insane because their last win came at Gather Round. But one of the big highlights of this team from this season is the development of their young players that they got from last year's draft and from the draft before, and even the draft before that, and even the mid-season pickups like El Extra, Archday Wicks,
Jackson Artemis also.
Jackson Artemis, Dyson Sharp, Jai Farrow, and Sullivan Roby. All of these players, even Lockie Blackiston, who came from a mid-season pickup, whilst they're not going to always have flashy games because they're so young and so new to the system, these are the sorts of games where they have an opportunity to really show a lot more of their prowess and what they have learned so far of being in the system and why they were recruited in the first place. And Dyson Sharp is by far and away one of the best standouts of this season so far in terms of the Rising Star nominations.
Yeah, exactly. As I said, I think that he's been very good, especially not exactly. I can't remember. Was he a second rounder or high?
He was pick 13, so he was a first rounder.
Oh yeah, I think that was the one he got from. Oh, Essendon did like a pick trade or something.
They did a big trade at one point, yeah.
Yeah.
Huge congratulations to him. This is obviously the Bombers' third Rising Star nomination this season, with West Coast and Richmond having 3 nominations as well. I wouldn't be surprised if in the last 5 rounds one of them picks up a 4th, but that remains to be seen at this point in time. All right, jumping over to the somewhat more negative news out of this round. Nate Caddy, as I had mentioned before, he went out in the first quarter with an elevated heart rate, was sent straight to hospital, but has been given the all clear to continue to train and play. Thank God. Xavier Dersma came up with a hamstring injury, and Toby Green is out with a quad. Unsure of the severity of that, will be confirmed likely when the injury list comes out tomorrow or today as of release. On the MRO side of things, I'll cover this game first before going backwards. Lockie Ash was fined a $5,000 flat rate for misconduct. Not entirely sure what that equates to. It happened sometime in the third quarter. Kyle Langford was suspended for 1 match for rough conduct against Stephen Canelio in the fourth quarter, and Archie Roberts was fined $1,000 for striking Clayton Oliver also in the fourth quarter. Going back to the Gold Coast Suns and Western Bulldogs game, Joel Freo was fined $1,000 for contact with an umpire, and Leo Lombard was fined $2,000 for rough conduct against Lockie McNeil. And going back to the Richmond and Hawthorn game, Sam Cumming was fined $1,875 for contact with an umpire, as it is his second offence.
All right.
And that rounds out.
Shall we go on to the ladder?
Yeah, and that rounds out the week that was. Apart from the ladder, where there is basically no changes, except for the bottom 2, where Essendon jump up to 17th with their second win on the board and a percentage of 67.9, whilst Richmond drop to 18th with their 70-point loss to the Hawks, with a percentage of 61.7. There's positives and negatives out of that. Negatives, obviously, you're last on the ladder. Positives, number 1 draft pick, potentially in our possession. I'm not opposed.
Yeah.
But also, I would prefer to not finish dead last, I'll be honest.
Honestly, I think it's just like, you had 4 wins last year. You don't want to halve the amount of wins you get. I think Richmond will just be happy getting 1 or 2 extra wins come the end of this year. Where that sends them on the ladder is a bit of a moot point. I think they're just, as I said, they're just getting a decent enough draft pick. Again, semi-compromised draft, so, it's not exactly like you're really... The difference between 1 or 2 isn't going to be huge.
No, I don't think so either. I do want to highlight, just as we were talking about throughout the episode, kind of the top 6, and just where we could see it kind of ending up. So I'm not really going to count the Dogs or Collingwood in this, or even Geelong necessarily in this sort of contention just right now. But from the teams currently in the top 6, Freo, who's pretty much secured first position, I will leave them there. But Sydney, Hawthorn, Brisbane, Adelaide, and the Demons. Who jumps to second and stays second at the end of the season? And who else makes up the top? What do you think the order of the top 6 is going to be at this point in time?
Oh, this is a bad time. I actually closed my run home, but I think I did have a look at this. I do actually think Sydney is a slight risk of losing their second spot. I think Brisbane, just with their run home, really could just, romp it all in. As I said, Brisbane have Port, Carlton, Hawthorn, Gold Coast, and Collingwood. Obviously, that Hawthorn game being fairly central.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, if Hawthorn win that, then they've got Essendon, North, Collingwood, and West Coast. So I think that game will actually determine second place. Third place, I still think Sydney's, going to be. They'll still make the top four. In fact, they could stay there. They've just got to win out.
Yep.
But as I said, they've just got to make sure not to slip up against either GWS or St Kilda or Port Adelaide. Actually, no, Sydney should make second.
No, that you're rethinking about it.
Yeah. I thought Sydney had a harder game. I think, I've decided that Fremantle and Sydney were top. And then, I think it was third. That's up to Hawthorn or Brisbane who makes that game. And then whoever loses, then, it's battling it out with Adelaide, who again, if they're able to capitalize on their tougher games that they have, they'll be able to get that. But I don't think Adelaide's in conversation for second. I do think they're able to win third, but it really depends how that Fremantle game goes. On paper, you're like, oh, it's tough, but like, we're also remembering Fremantle will be. I reckon if Fremantle's smart, they won't just rest their players like all in 1 week. You know what I mean? They'll have a few that they're like, okay, we're going to be putting a few more in the last couple of rounds.
They might
win ladder position.
They might mix up some of their depth a bit more just to get a little bit more of that experience. Just make sure that enough of their players can be sort of finals ready, maybe. But it's that's entirely up to them. Again, they've got first position basically locked in the bag, so it's kind of a wait and see as to what they do. But I kind of agree with your reasoning. I think if Sydney don't drop some of those danger games, I think second place could be locked in for them. But I think Hawthorn and Brisbane are probably the only two that could really contend for it. And then I think the Crows could probably push third or fourth. But again, they need to not drop some of their danger games either. And I think Melbourne are just kind of hanging around, really. Like they have an opportunity. But I think fifth or sixth will probably be where they end up. Maybe drop to seventh. It's all very dependent.
I think Adelaide would like for Hawthorn to beat Brisbane. And then their top four entry is looking a bit more likely than if Brisbane were to beat Hawthorn. Because again, I think Brisbane have another game that's theoretical.
Hawthorn and Collingwood are the two teams that are really weird to kind of judge purely for the fact that they have that draw.
Yeah, exactly. But as I said, I think I could see Brisbane losing against Gold Coast or Collingwood. Gold Coast only because it's a Q clash. But again, it's very easy runs for these top four teams. Again, unfortunately, the fixture sort of stuffed itself where most of the games in the back season will determine who's going to win the 7th, 8th, or 9th. Which, again, would be exciting if it was an 8-season team ladder. It would be nail-biting. But 10th is just going to be some dumbass team. And it's oh, well, are you going to get your elimination final home or away? Who cares? You know what I mean?
Yeah, pretty much.
Unless Melbourne stuff up, they won't lose 6. So, top 6 is locked up, which is the most important thing. So, again, the AFL sort of shot themselves in the foot. I guess if you're a GWS and St Kilda fan, you care which of you make finals. I guess North and Carlton are technically in the hunt, but not really.
For Carlton and North, it's very much a percentage thing right now, whereas for GWS and St Kilda, they have opportunities here because they have a decent percentage. But they just have to win games to kind of solidify it.
St Kilda just need an upset. But again, one upset will give them more likelihood against GWS, who have a slightly easier run, but also just lost to Essendon.
Exactly.
They should have been favourites if they didn't do that. They almost had it in the bag.
Pretty much. All right, let's jump over now to the week ahead, where we have a very, very exciting game. Big Thursday night clash over at the Adelaide Oval, where the Crows will take on the Pies.
Yeah, as I said, it's one of those games where you're like, oh, the Crows should win this. They're a fairly good team, but Collingwood should match up well against them because, again, Collingwood, very much a control team, and we've seen Adelaide rely on meterage off that halfback thing. But, as we've seen, Collingwood, they like to get interceptions. They like to force turnovers, get into the back line quickly, and, try and, I guess, sneak past some of the good defensive structures that other teams provide. Uh, Overall, it's very weird. Like Collingwood has a worse attack, but they have much better efficiency numbers than Adelaide, who are quite an efficient team. So as I said, it's really hard to gauge. But as I said, Collingwood have to be defensively on song, and I don't think they'll be doing this week without Howe or Darcy Moore. But if they get one back, that would be a silly chance. But overall, I think Adelaide's just showed enough. They've got an exciting team. They'll get a few players as well. A few more senior players maybe getting back. They'll probably play Tex.
Yeah.
Try and secure this game, and they should win. Like I said, if no one comes back defensively for Collingwood, I would say definitely Adelaide. But if they get one back, I think it makes it more even than you would think.
Agreed. There's definitely if their injuries do come to fruition of recovery, there definitely is an opportunity for Collingwood to have a little bit more of that sneaky chance. If not, and obviously Adelaide will more likely than not bring back Tex because he predominantly plays the home games currently due to age, physical health, all that sort of stuff. Crows should theoretically have this in the bag. Again, they're a safe tip. They'd be the safe tip in this game, but there are 100% avenues for Collingwood to play upset here. Speaking of more potential upsets, we jump over to our Friday night clash where the Demons will host the Cats at the MCG.
Yeah, and as I said, it's sort of weird because again, it's a very line bowl game in terms of maybe not so much the stats, but as I said, when you consider the fact that Geelong's had two very influential players out, as I said, Melbourne are in the worst form at the moment. They definitely should be believing they've got a chance for this, especially at the MCG over Cardinia Park. However, Melbourne's defense is still like I said, they've had some okay performances, but again, depending on how Disco Turner rocks up, I do think that they're lost a bit of defensive structure. I think that they'll rely on some higher up intercepts, a bit more pressure on the ball carrier, try and prevent that run and carry from turning into entries, because I do think if Geelong get it in there, then they should win moderately comfortably. Like, not like a big margin, but just like have control of the game. Whereas on the flip side, it's Melbourne's midfield. They can harden up a few entries. They definitely have a bit of a clearance advantage. So it's just about opportunities supplying that forward line, which most of the time has converted. And again, as much as like Melbourne's defense is nothing to write home about, like neither is Geelong. So again, minor advantage to Geelong, but I would definitely be not surprised if Melbourne had the upset. Even if it is an upset, maybe it's just neutral.
I mean, yeah, this is probably more of a neutral than an upset. I think it was more so thinking on like ladder position sort of stuff. But like these teams match up fairly evenly, especially with Melbourne's quote unquote newer style. I definitely think, and especially compared to last season as well. Like I think they match up very, very well together. I guess a lot of this would be dependent off of their halfback. Again, yeah, if Melbourne's defense doesn't end up recovering, like obviously they're going to lose CJ. But if Disco isn't right to go, that is a huge issue for their defensive lineup, and that could create a lot of opportunity, especially with Polkinghorne, really becoming sort of the secondary key now that Shannon Neal has taken first position, as with Jeremy Cameron being out. Like it does create headaches because the Cats forward line is now a little bit more versatile. So that'll be very interesting. Otherwise, I think a lot of this game will just be one out of the middle. Again, like I haven't really rated any of Geelong's rucks this season really at all. Some of them have standout games, but again, it's like neither here nor there. You're coming up against Max Gawn and Max Heath, who have done some fantastic work this season. And like, Melbourne's midfield has been really, really good this season overall. Again, Jack Steele, Trent Rivers, Tom Sparrow, obviously the Pickett boys are doing some fantastic work all season long. Like, I already mentioned Jack Steele, but like, they look really good. They match up really well with Geelong. This could genuinely just be a coin flip game.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, both teams that don't mind loosening up their defenses a bit, so it could also be a shootout, which we sort of want to see with these back half contests. And again, like I was saying, a big middle of the ladder match, technically.
And especially if Bailey Fritsch is allowed to play forward and doesn't have to fill in down in defence, it could definitely be more of a shootout.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know. Maybe that's just at the moment.
Possibly. So. Let's jump over now to the West, where the Western Derby has once again made its appearance. Will West Coast sneak out a cheeky win, as they kind of love to do in these sorts of matchups, or will Freo just continue on with their top of the ladder dominance? What do you think?
Love to. I mean, they won once out of the last 10 matches. Like that. It was a good once, but there's still been nowhere near it. Yeah. Like the average Derby margin's been quite woeful, unfortunately.
This is unfortunately true.
Nowhere near the closeness, randomness of the showdown, which is unfortunate because these two teams hate each other. But it just seems that they always thrash each other. I don't know how it really works. Look, it's not genius to tell you that just Freo, statistically far better in every metric. And, as I said, we know that West Coast love to bring the ball to ground and all that, makes scrap. And Freo are a good outside marking team. They slow the game down. They're not going to play West Coast in the game that they want to play. And honestly, I reckon Freo might be margin hunting. I know they don't have to, but I feel like this is the game where they're like, okay, let's stamp our authority on the competition, get as much margin as we can, and then just sort of manage the team.
I guess if they want to,
4 games.
Granted, a win would just seal it anyway. But if they want to 100% guarantee the minor premiership, adding some more percentage would not be a bad idea.
Yeah, because I mean, honestly, Sydney's the only one that can possibly. Well, even then, it's a fast stretch. It's 142 compared to 128 at the moment. It would take a lot. But yeah, so they don't need the percentage. But I just think in terms of I think Freo have had not too many, but you know what I mean. This part of the season, they haven't had a big win, and I think people are. I'm not saying sleeping on them, but I think they're almost waiting on Freo, where they want to come in with a bit more impact. Not that they need to. I just for the theatrics of the season, which doesn't bode well for West Coast. I think they're just going to struggle anyway. I don't think they match up well against Freo.
No, they do
anyway,
not.
So
I think it could be a bit of a fun midfield matchup, especially if Harley Reid wants to get a little bit dirty, a little bit more aggressive against whoever he matches up on, whether it's Brayshaw, whether it's Sarong, whether it's whoever. I think that'll be a bit of fun.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you would assume Fremantle by far and away would tear the Eagles wide open.
I mean, the Eagles, whilst they have been limited in their backline, they have mainly just faced Sounds Adelaide, which they did really well with, mind you. They haven't really faced too many fully potent backlines, and they were missing Phil Thorpe in that game, if I remember.
Very true.
Whereas this one with the 3 big tolls, and the Eagles backline, it's a tall order, that's for sure.
All right, in that case, let's jump over now to our Saturday games, where Carlton will host the Gold Coast Suns at Marvel Stadium.
Essentially an elimination finals, you got to treat this as much as we were talking about Dimmer before, if Gold Coast win, they're just literally too many far games behind, and Carlton have a rough schedule. If they lose, they're just their silly chance turns even sillier.
Yeah, Carlton need a lot. Apart from them just needing to win, they still need a lot to go right for them to not just ensure wildcard, but to more so guarantee a decent chance at finals.
Yeah. So the funny thing is we've got Carlton, who are a pretty good stoppage team, but don't score much with turnover.
Mm-hmm.
Where Gold Coast pretty much only score from turnover and have really struggled from scoring from stoppage. So it's sort of one of those things where they almost cancel each other out. Defensively wise, again, it depends what's happened. I would say Carlton have a far better Carlton's defense has been playing better.
Mhm.
Gold Coast have better defenders. And I do think, like, if Wiedering comes back, I don't actually know when Wiedering's coming back.
I
Looked at
haven't
the
had a
injury list
look,
for Carlton.
so that'll be a good question as
It's
well.
funny. It's like I only really look at the ones of like Port and the teams that were contending. So I don't know. But I hope he's back soon. But yeah, as I said, they were tiring out a bit. I did think like Wilson and all that played okay. It's just they weren't quite keeping up.
Yeah, I agree.
It's really just the attack. It's whoever's attack looks respectable, and I'm not sure that again. This is like the Bulldogs game where I don't trust either team.
Yep.
But Gold Coast got to win sometime, don't they? Oh man, I can't be tipping Carlton, can I? I don't know.
Well, I mean, look at it this way. Like, there's on paper, Gold Coast honestly should win this. Just straight up on paper, okay. Gold Coast by far and away should win this. From what we've seen out of their performances, they should not win this. However, Carlton's midfield is a little bit injury prone at the moment. Even though they still have, they've still got Cripper.
Cripps and Walsh.
They've still got Walsh.
Do they have Walsh?
They've still got Jagger Smith, who's been doing some fantastic work since his debut. Number 2 draft pick in the same draft as Sam Lawler, for note. Not the point, but he's a great talent. They brought Blake Acres back in for some coverage, who did some decent work this past week. But there have openings there that can be capitalized on by the Suns outfit. Whether they do, that remains to be seen. But because of the fact that Carlton's backline is also a little bit prone, they're probably a little bit sore because they're such a younger backline right now, especially without Wiedering. That there's an opportunity there for the Suns to capitalize. However,
if Carlton were healthy, I would tip them.
Yeah, agree. I'm probably still going to tip Carlton just because I prefer what I've seen from them more so out of what I've seen out of the Suns. But there is a fair chance that the Suns could finally get a win on the board here.
We didn't really talk about it, but obviously I was just one wrong this week, but that'd be 3 wrong Carlton tips in a row for you if they did.
It would. This is true. I'm surprised you weren't more angry at the Giants for ruining your perfect round, might I add.
It affected our competition, but in most competitions that don't have bonus points for perfects, it doesn't matter. Everyone else got it wrong anyway. It was just of all the ones to get wrong, I was sweating on Gold Coast and Western Bulldogs. And then it's just I guess Essendon will just win then. Okay, sure, whatever.
You jinxed it. You said, I would have a perfect round unless Essendon pull off a miracle win or whatever. And you basically jinxed it.
Yeah, and I was just I got it. And they're like, I guess Essendon could win. And I was like, Essendon got to prove that they've got any signs of winning. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
Talking about versus Hawthorn, who have been the lower ladder destroyers at the moment.
Yes, I expect
will Essendon suffer the same fate.
I expect a similar sort of outcome to what happened last week against Richmond. I say last week, literally yesterday. But I honestly think that Essendon could put up a little bit more of a fight in terms, not necessarily in the midfield, but I think more so on the defensive half. Not saying that Essendon have a better backline, but I think they have probably learned a little bit more over their past couple of weeks and may be able to shut down Hawks' forward line a little bit better. But I think there'll be no matchup for Hawks' defense in return.
They just need a good quarter. Honestly, Hawks have torn apart teams with terrible ball use, and even against GWS, Essendon's ball use was terrible. So. Whilst, as I said, I didn't give Essendon that much respect, but I did say, GWS, it's a team that you wouldn't be surprised, whereas this would just.
That's pretty much what we all said. It's we're not surprised if they lose, but also what the heck.
Yeah, they shouldn't have. GWS tried everything in their power to still, you know what I mean?
They tried everything in their power to
Like,
win
Essendon
except
weren't
kick
that
goals.
impressive. It's just, GWS were more not impressive than Essendon were
Yeah.
impressive.
But yeah, the Hawks
we
should
don't
absolutely
need to
demolish the
too much.
Bombers, realistically.
Yeah, we think so.
So in that case,
Now,
we will move on to the Battle of the Bridge, where the Giants and the Swans go head to head once again. This time being hosted at NG Stadium.
yeah, honestly, as I said, I always have the match previews loaded up on Wheelo. Try not to focus too much on them, but they are saying Western Sydney Giants by 2.3 points, and I just want to know where that's coming from.
Well,
Because
Sydney won the last one. No, didn't the Giants win the last one?
no, that was last year.
Oh, yeah, that was. Oh, yeah. For some reason I keep thinking it was this year. But like, these two have always matched up really, really well, despite how their seasons have gone. Like, this battle is always super, super anomalistic, and it's so weird.
Yeah.
Again, because that leads into the Giants' inconsistencies. But also Sydney, haven't looked the greatest of recent, even though they're still top two. It's a really weird matchup this time around.
Yeah, the Giants tend to perform better at NG than they do in Sydney. I think Sydney have a much more bigger home crowd advantage. You know what I mean. But that being said, it's it's interesting. Like, if GWS are as poor in the middle, it should just be Sydney. However, as I said, we did see with the tall forward shutdown, Sydney struggled to score. I mean, it was their problem against Adelaide. And they will be relying on some big performances of their midfielders. And the Giants can defend it. Sydney as well, they're not the most defensive team, so, that back half run by the Giants may give them some avenue, but, like, they lost to Essendon.
Yeah.
I guess maybe that's just a blank, like a team like GWS who have been mercurial or traceable. You just gotta forget about it. But I give Sydney a bit more credit. Like, I do think that this is like slight danger game, but like, geez. Essentially, an algorithm would have been putting GWS in front.
Essentially, both teams need to win this. GWS to be in wildcard contention, Sydney to help better ensure their second place.
Locker home final,
yeah. But
or two, I should say.
Yeah, realistically. But yeah, the fact of the matter is that like this again is another of those coin flip games because the clash has always been so anomalistic in comparatively to the rest of their seasons.
Yeah, well, even that game, like the one you were talking about, where because I think that was the game where Sydney got out. I think it was 7 goals or something into not much in the first half.
That was one of the years where the Giants we viewed the Giants as very much a grindy sort of team. Like they will weigh you down, and they just casually claw their way back into a competition. They have not really been that this season.
No,
but again, it's so hard to kind of quantify this sort of battle. Like you want to go the Swans on paper.
Well,
the Swans should do it, but it's the Giants.
As much as the last 2 games haven't been close, last matchup, I forgot about this. It was 8-18, 66 to 7-5, 107. You know what I mean? Theoretically, that was a closer match than what it should have been. But also 8-18. When have we heard that one before, Blaze?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Again, on paper.
To be fair, 8-16 against Essendon, they were more accurate in that match.
Technically true.
Yeah.
But yeah, if safe tip, probably the Swans. But don't be surprised if they drop this to the Giants because it tends to weirdly happen for some reason. All right, a game that should not be dropped by the team above them on the ladder. The Bulldogs hosting the Tigers out at Marvel. Again, I just want to see some consistency. That's pretty much all I asked. I expect the Dogs to win this outright. I expect them to try and make this a margin game because they need the percentage to try and jump some teams on the ladder. But if I can at least see some sort of consistency out of us, not necessarily. I would love to play it close, but I don't expect that. But if I can just see, some sort of good work around the ground, some decent accuracy up forward, I would be very content with that. Because I plan on being in this game, and I don't want to be massively disappointed.
I don't think the Western Bulldogs are playing like that well, and I think that Richmond can make this a respectable game. Like, again, I don't think they'll win, especially with their defense the way it is at the moment. But like, I definitely could see this defense coming better. Again, their forward line, just shouldn't really pose too much of a threat for the Bulldogs backline. But again, it is the Bulldogs backline, so I was like, it's just they've got to make the most of this. As I said, Richmond have to at least get positive signs for the more winnable games come the back end of the season, which we will go through. There's about 2 of them, and they have to show signs of this game. Hell, they even might win it. Who knows? I mean, the Bulldogs struggled against a few bottom-ish teams, so
I would not be opposed to see a win on a Saturday night. But I expect, safe tip, go the Dogs. I expect this to be a percentage game.
It's like Bulldogs 80%, but I don't think Richmond. I think Richmond need to hold themselves to enough account to where they will need to ask themselves to compete. Because I think they need to.
I agree.
Right.
Sunday games starting off at the Gabba, where the reigning premiers will host Port Adelaide. It's entirely your call as to where you see this game going.
Oh man, like as brave as Port were against Fremantle, they just don't tend to go too well against Brisbane, especially at the Gabba. Like, as I said, there was that one freak game, round 1 2023, where they absolutely smashed them. Everything else has been way Brisbane. Even when Brisbane was struggling, they got a few wins against Port. There's not really much to say. Again, like, they were able to restrict Fremantle's clearances. Brisbane's probably a better clearance team, but I'd like to see them do similar efforts against them. That would be nice. Restricting that defense is going to be hard. We already saw them struggle against Freo. So I do think that what's his name? Logan Morris will find a few moments. Charlie Cameron too. Port's ground defense is only moderately good. So as I said, he might find a few. So again, it'll be about stopping as much as possible. Brisbane, at least they've had games against lower teams where they haven't really put them to bed. Like, Brisbane have risen to the occasion. Like, they've got wins against good teams, but they've also been lethargic against lower teams, which is probably Port's saving grace. But otherwise, it's just it's as clear as Fremantle was clear.
Yeah, I agree.
Even
with
with
much
the
as
impressiveness against them.
Even though Port are missing a lot of really key players, last week they showed a fair bit of promise. But against the reigning premiers, if the reigning premiers kind of hit their foot off the gas a little in this game and kind of let Port in, I assume the Lions would win this outright. Whether they make it a percentage game, they probably should. I don't expect it though. But it's a wait and see kind of thing.
Man, if I was to see a game where Port just have everything catch up to them, I would say it's this game. Like, they just don't have a good record against Brisbane.
Yeah.
They're just Anyway, so something that should be a bit closer and probably maybe not the greatest, but one of the more interesting.
I see this is a bit of a Mickey Mouse kind of game where it's sort of irrelevant, but also kind of not at the same time. Where both teams essentially need to win to keep their seasons alive.
Honestly, this is a line in the game, Sam, for North Melbourne. If they lose this, they will be disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't lose this. if they again just disappear for a half or bottle it in when they shouldn't, they'll be disappointed. I mean, look, they could have a respectable loss against St Kilda. I give St Kilda a bit of credit there, but they just can't afford not to show up for this game. And again, against St Kilda, who are, and this may surprise you, a better clearance team than North Melbourne this year. So, as I said, offensively, they've been in a hole, but we can see that improve. But again, you're going to be asking a lot for Larky. He's been in a bit of bad form up against Callum. Well, maybe not directly Callum Wilkie, but again, a defense where Callum Wilkie is going to be lurking to intercept. So you sort of want big impact from Larky to keep him more honest. Maybe even get the direct matchup. But otherwise, statistically, I mean, everything's in the Saints' favor. As I said, the Saints are statistically a pretty solid team. Are much more consistent than North have been.
Oh yeah.
But North have a bit of pizzazz sometimes. I wouldn't rule them out, but again, this is his litmus test. This is your again line in the sand. This is what North fans just need to see this being a win, or a very close loss. With respectable football being played. Because again, Saints and North could play a stinker. I could see that happening too.
Oh yeah. If North can't win this, but are able to keep the margin really, really close, it still keeps them in decent contention for wildcard.
Yeah.
But if they lose this by a decent margin, it's probably season over in terms of trying to make finals.
I think it's season over if they lose this, but I do think that as I said, I don't think it's as relevant if they get 9th or 10th this year. You know what I mean? They'll be a first round exit. That.
Oh yeah, you would assume so.
There's no doubt in my mind they are leagues behind 6 or 7.
Again, as we said, going over their match from last week, they're heading in a decent direction in terms of their development, but we're not seeing enough from them to where it's they're not at the level that they should be just yet.
Yeah. As I said, this is a game where they need us to tell us that St Kilda are their peers.
Yeah.
Again, though, it's going to be tough because, again, that midfield needs to lift. I think they have been damaging. I do legitimately think they've actually been playing a bit better than the first half of the year. However, as I said, unfortunately, it's coincided with their forward line dropping into a hole. And whilst they've had some okay-ish movement from the back half at times, their defense is back to being just plain terrible. So, as I said, St Kilda are definitely more consistent amongst our lines, but and I do think they should be 60 to 65% favorites. But again, North definitely shouldn't be playing badly against them, and they need to make this a good contest.
Yeah, I completely agree. But that pretty much brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you all so much for liking, commenting, subscribing, and just coming to hang out with us this week. Are you up to much this week?
Yes, but mainly just errands. Nothing that fun. So, nothing really to write home about. So, I'll just be, trying to enjoy the week. Again, looking after my mum. She's still hobbling around.
Yes,
so, And of course, looking forward to our bonus episode.
Yes.
I do like going over the run home, so we'll get you that hopefully tomorrow. Well, we'll record it tomorrow, I should say.
Plan is to record tomorrow, probably release on Thursday before Thursday night's match. For me, outside of obviously looking forward to recording our run home episode, I will be at the Western Bulldogs Richmond game. I could potentially also be at the North and St Kilda game if my best friend is around. Otherwise, it's just, doing stuff at work, getting rid of all of this IKEA boxes that are sitting behind me that I need to get rid of, and just getting this wall finished. That's pretty much all of my goals for this week.
I mean, it sounds good, but I am very heartbroken that I have been officially eliminated from being Blazer's best friend.
You're
tough.
You're in the top 3.
Ooh,
That's
nice.
You're in the top 3. But yes, no.
I appreciate it.
Yes. I don't know where to go from there now.
Sorry,
They really threw me off.
Obviously, yeah. I appreciate you, Lazy, and hopefully we'll see more football games together in our future.
Yes, fingers are crossed that I get to either make it back over to Perth for the footy, or you get to come over here, or we meet in the middle for another South Australia clash. Who knows? But yes,
the AFLW as well, depending on.
Yes, that's very true. We've got the AFLW coming up, which I'm very excited to try and catch a couple more AFLW matches this season. So I'm looking forward to that. But yes, thank you all so much once again, and we'll see you all next week for episode. Oh, actually, we'll see you on Wednesday or Thursday for our bonus episode, and then we'll see you next week for episode 116. So until then, take care.